and resume this budget briefing of the DBCC by the Senate Committee on Finance. We'd like to acknowledge our members and vice chairs present. We have with us Vice Chair Cynthia Villar, Vice Chair Nancy Binay, Vice Chair and Deputy Minority Leader Senator Risa Ontiveros. Good morning, Your Honors. We'd like to also greet our good secretaries who are present. We have representing the Office of the President, Senior Deputy Executive Secretary Hubert Guevara and his team. Morning, sir. Of course, from the DOF, Sec Ben Jokno. From the NEDA, Sec RC Balisacan. From the TBM, Sec Amina Pangandaman. Morning, Your Honors. And from the BSP, Governor Eli asked to be excused because of an important engagement today, and I asked with the permission of our colleagues, they graciously agreed. We'd like to acknowledge Deputy Governor Bruce Tolentino and Senior Assistant Governor Iluminada Sikat, and Deputy Governor Dakila is also with us. Good morning, Your Honors. So I think just for orderly procedure, we'd like to repeat the order, subject of course to the arrival of the 4 Senate officers, although we would like to give our colleagues a chance to ask in the first round. Vice Chair Senator Pia Cayetano has 5 minutes left. Then Vice Chair Senator Cynthia Villar, Vice Chairs Binay, De La Rosa, Ontiveros, Ejercito, Gatchalian, Senator Alan Cayetano, Vice Chair Chingoy Estrada, Senator Rafi Tulfo, Vice Chair Senator Grace Poe. That's in the order of arrival. Again, subject to the tradition of allowing our 4 Senate officers to speak. So we'll give the floor now to Vice Chair Senator Cynthia Villar. Ma'am, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. I want to say good morning to all our colleagues in the Senate and as well as the our colleagues in the executive department. I don't have to mention all the name. I might miss out and magagalit pa kayo sa akin. So, the problem of agriculture is can be discussed during the Senate hearing on the budget of agriculture. But I'm discussing these issues for the benefit of those who will be making the budget before, so you will know, you will understand agriculture. So when you make the budget for agriculture, you will have some idea of how to do it. Kasi minsan malayong-malayo dun sa kailangan ng agriculture. First of all, I want to discuss rice. Kasi alam nyo, ang rice is the most important agricultural product in the Philippines. In fact, when I passed the rice tariffication law, which liberalized the importation of rice, that was done in 2018 because the Department of Finance asked me to do it because rice has risen from 32 to 40 per kilo to 48 to 60 per kilo. And you know naman, pag nagtaas ang price ng rice, the president becomes unpopular. Diba? So, ngayon tumataas ang price of rice, you have to be careful because the popularity of the president will be affected. But anyway, I want to discuss the rice tariffication law in that context, na it was supposed to bring down the price of rice in the market. Okay? Dati po, ang system is there's no liberalization. Ang nag-i-import is NFA. NFA, oo. And parang may cartel. Kasi for the price of rice to rise from 32 to 40 to 48 to 60, there must be something wrong. So they asked me to take out the power of the NFA and instead liberalize the importation of rice. Kasi parang nakikita nila may cartel na between NFA and the traders and the importers. So I did not write the bill without any study to support it. So we asked the PIDS to study. And we compared Vietnam and the Philippines because Vietnam then and up to now has the lowest cost in the production of palay. During that time and up to now, Vietnam produces palay at 6 pesos per kilo. And the Philippines, 12.50 per kilo. Kaya napakalayo. That's why we import a lot of rice from Vietnam. So the idea is to make a rice farmer competitive and more productive. So when they studied, the PIDS studied that, the reason is number one, the labor cost in the Philippines is higher by 350 per kilo. So yung 6 peso difference, 350 non-labor. So it's mechanization, di ba? Pag mataas ang labor cost, then you have to mechanize. And the other 250 is the productivity of the seeds. So we had to determine what kind of seeds we will use to improve productivity. So we mechanize. So tinanong ko sa kanila, how much will we collect if we liberalize the importation of rice? And they said 12 billion. So I put, kaya 10 billion yon kasi hindi naman pwede na eksaktong-eksakto gagawin natin. I thought that 12 billion is correct. So 10 billion. So I gave 5 billion to mechanization under PhilMech and 3 billion to the PhilRice to distribute inbred seeds to the farmers and at the same time teach the farmers how to produce inbred seed because that can be produced in the Philippines. Oo. So 3 billion and then I gave 1 billion to Land Bank and DBP because that will prevent farmers from being victim of 5-6. And then another 1 billion to TESDA and ATI and PhilMech, PhilRice for training. Because even if we mechanize and we don't train them to how to use the machine and how to maintain the machine. Kasi ang daming complaint na yung pinamimigay na machine ng DA, puro nakatiwangwang lang kasi hindi sila marunong mag-maintain. So I gave a lot for training on how to operate and how to maintain. And at the same time, at para magturo ng inbred seed production. So our seeds will come from the Philippines. And PhilRice promised that from 3.7 metric tons per hectare, they can raise it to 6 metric tons per hectare, which is about doubling, almost double. And if we double our production of rice, then we're self-sufficient and we can export. Kasi ang shortage lang natin, 15%. Oh, kung madodouble mo, di tapos ang problema, hindi na tayo kailangang mag-import ng rice. But I did not remove NFA because there are 4,000 employees of NFA. Gusto ba nyo, online ako araw-araw dahil tinanggalan ko sila ng trabaho. But happily, after that, kasi hindi na sila maraming trabaho, kasi hindi na sila mag-i-import, they offered a very nice early retirement package. And I think 50% of the NFA employees retired. So, na-solve din partially yung over na employees ng NFA. And we're doing it now. I think PhilRice said that they can reach 5 metric tons per hectare by next year. And PhilMech, ang daming changes sa PhilMech. Marami akong konsumisyon sa PhilMech, but that's part of the government na pag malaki budget, pinapalitan nila ng mga kaibigan nila yung head ng agency. So I cannot stop that, but we're doing our best to do oversight. Now, I saw in your budget that you gave 30 billion to the National Rice Program. So yung National Rice Program is parallel to the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, di ba? Nung kasabay namin yan, 15.7 billion lang ang budget niyan. Ngayon, 30 billion na. So, alam nyo ba ginagawa ng National Rice Program? They just import hybrid seedlings. And that's very expensive and very expensive to grow. Kasi malaki ang production niyan, pero ang laki ng inputs. So yung hybrid seedlings, bagay lang yan sa mayayamang na rice farmers. Okay lang gumamit ng hybrid rice seedlings. Kasi ang inbred rice seedlings is 30 pesos per kilo. Ang hybrid is 250 per kilo. So, ibig sabihin, for rice farmers that can afford that kind of rice seedlings and the inputs needed, okay lang yon. But not for the poor farmers of the Philippines, who are the majority in the Philippines. Kaya gusto ko lang po na pag nilagay nyo na malaki budget ng National Rice Program, wag nyo ilimit sa hybrid seedlings. Pag sila masusunod, it's all hybrid seedlings because they import. I don't know why they like importation. Sometimes I call them Department of Importation. And then they import chemical fertilizer. Yun lang, dalawang yun ang major sa National Rice Program. Chemical fertilizer, which is bad for the soil. 38% of the soil of the Philippines is degraded. And I asked the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization, how do you solve the degradation of the soil? And they answered, compost all your waste and bring them back to the soil. So there is really a need for composting. But unfortunately, every time you make the budget, you don't give a budget to the Bureau of Soil and Water Management to distribute composting facilities all over the Philippines. Because we can produce fertilizer in the Philippines by composting. 50% of our waste are kitchen and garden waste, which can be turned into organic fertilizer. So if we gave every municipality in the Philippines to do composting, they don't have to buy all their fertilizer. They can just make it. And at the same time, our animal producer, livestock and poultry, they can produce organic fertilizer also from chicken manure and other animal manure. But their complaint, I went to Batangas, they are producing organic fertilizer out of chicken manure. The DA won't buy them. Nag-i-invoke sila ng certain permit to buy from them, which I don't understand. So I'm telling this to you just to inform you of what you have to do. Maybe when you give 30 billion to the National Rice Program, you break it down. Maybe you allocate a certain amount for hybrid seedlings and inbred seedlings, and then you give the fertilizer to Bureau of Soil and Water Management instead of importing all inorganic fertilizer. Kasi po yung inorganic fertilizer will destroy our soil. And in France, I always go to France to observe their agriculture because they are very fond of agriculture, even if it's a first world country. Kasi mahilig sila sa pagkain. They forbid the use of inorganic or chemical fertilizer already. Kasi daw yung kinikita nila sa kanilang crops dahil sa fertilizer, kulang pa para linisin nila yung ilog nila na popollute ng chemical fertilizer. Kaya ayaw na nila. At saka yung soil nila na nasisira ng chemical fertilizer. So,
Your Honor, with your permission, I just want to inform you, you've consumed 11 minutes already.
Yeah.
You might want to ask a
them,
question. Yeah.
So, because, I can ask this in the DA budget, but they are the policy making, so they have
With
to
you.
understand
In fact, everything you've said, we agree with Your Honor that we prioritize local inputs.
Yun lang ang gusto kong sabihin, and at the same time, I just want to question the SIDA law. Kasi yung SIDA law, it's the first law I passed, and malaki problema natin sa sugar.
The sugar.
Oo. And the Senate President asked me to discuss this. Under the SIDA law, they have the sugar industry has a 2 billion budget every year. 1 billion for what you call this, infrastructure in the sugar producing provinces, 300 million to land bank for loans to sugar farmers, 300 million to the black farm for land, for the ARBs. They call the farm of the ARBs as black farm, and 300 million for mechanization, 100 million for training. So you can see that meron na namang mechanization kasi that's very important to the competitiveness. But when I saw your budget, there's no budget specifically for the sugar industry. Pinaghiwa-hiwalay nyo to. So we want to make it clear where the SIDA law is in your budget. Yun. And then of course, another question is the CDA. Kasi do sa coconut industry, Coconut Farmers and Industry Development Fund, nakalagay doon, we will give 5% of the budget or 250 million to CDA for them to form cooperatives. And because unlike in the rice industry, there are plenty of cooperatives, but in the coconut industry, there are no cooperatives. So we have to form cooperatives. So because we cannot do processing without cooperatives, and we cannot do the dairy industry intercropping without cooperatives, because that is being done by cooperative. So kasi from my experience, hindi kayo naging definite dito. In fact, you're giving a budget to CDA to help cooperative. Parang binasa ko po yung the law that created cooperative. They are for forming cooperative and managing, helping them manage better the cooperative, but never to give projects to cooperative. Why yung 250 million binigay nila sa isang cooperative ng coconut farmers instead of forming cooperative? So I just want to mention this to you so you will be guided accordingly, and maybe you can answer me on what you hope to do to solve this problem. These are my only question.
Anybody can answer? Sec RC, I know is. By the way, I just want to mention to the body, congratulate Sec RC. Tonight he's receiving the Outstanding Alumnus Award from the UP Alumni Association. Congratulations, Sec RC. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kahit mamaya na yung pakain, Sec, okay lang.
Thank you. But yeah, if I may just respond, Mr. Chair. I think I'm wearing my hat as an agriculture researcher. What you have mentioned, ma'am, is about preference for importation of seeds. I think that has been also a kind of perspective that that we hold, because we know that in agriculture napaka-sensitive. Yung mga plants are very sensitive to soil, to climate, to pest, and these are localized. So if you import seeds from abroad to plant it here, they're not likely to perform as well as where they come from. So if you are seeing 7 tons per hectare in China for their hybrid seed, you won't see it here because their conditions are different. So the way to do is to import the seeds, further develop it here through what we call applied research. But unfortunately, we are not putting money to research to develop those kind of technologies.
Phil Rice is doing that.
Doing
Phil
that now,
Rice
ma'am.
can do that.
That's what they should be doing, and I am glad that actually they are moving in that direction. But that has been
Very supportive of Phil Rice. They're very good people supporting the rice industry.
yeah, that has been a major concern for a long time, Mr. Chair, and we really need to put in more resources into developing technologies that are appropriate for our local conditions. For example, it has been a long practice in agriculture in DA that when they develop a prescription for say fertilizer, It's the same fertilizer prescription everywhere in the country. And that doesn't work. At least from my background as an agriculture graduate, it doesn't work because the conditions are so different. You have to develop packages of technologies appropriate for its regions, for its locality in the country. So
That's why the president has included the soil laboratory
Exactly,
in the budget.
in
I
the
was
past,
there
ma'am.
when he approved that.
Yes.
So.
In the past, ma'am, what they do, that's why our agriculture is not so responsive to the demands of farmers, is that whenever there are soil deficient, nutrient deficiencies in one place, what they do is, say in Mindanao or in Cebu, they'll bring it to Manila to test. That was some time ago. I don't know if that has changed now. And by the time the solution, the result of the lab comes out, the plants already already died. I mean the production cycle has already complete. So the system, in other words, Mr. Chair, was then not so responsive to the actual situations that farmers faced across the land, and so our appeal is that we provide more resources to our agencies that produce technologies, appropriate technologies for the various places of the country. We have that penchant for importing machines, for example, tractors. That would be appropriate for haciendas, but would not be appropriate for small farms in my hometown, in my region, where the size of paddies are so small, no? So mga ganon, no? We have to just to develop technologies that are appropriate for. Unfortunately, those technologies are not manna from heaven. We have to put in resources into those institutions that are responsible, and I think we can make state universities and colleges, for example, be more responsive to developing such technologies for the regions where they are from.
And Philmec is the Philippine mechanization. They have been in existence for 1995, though, so that's more than 30, almost 30 years. But how come we are not performing well? So I think there are agencies in the Department of Agriculture which are assigned to that, but they are not. They are just there. Na hindi sila ano. I think mechanization, because lahat ng law natin may mechanization. So kailangan siguro encourage natin ang establishment of mechanization companies in the Philippines, kasi nakita ko doon sa report nyo na of all the sector of the economy, yung industries ang napakaliit, 7%, di ba? Oh,
Agri is
sir,
only 0.1%
Yeah.
contribution to GDP
7%.
from the figure.
Samantalang lahat ng budget natin na sinulat ko, mechanization, because that's the idea of modernizing agriculture. You have to mechanize. Hindi na talaga pwede yung magtanim ay di biro, maghapong nakaupo. Hindi na talaga, kanta yun hindi na totoo yun Oh, and I have a farm school and I have a tourist farm in my city, malaki. Hirap na hirap ako mag-manage ng tao kasi hindi na nila type magtrabaho So ako talaga, if I have the machine, I will mechanize. Kasi mas madaling i-manage ang farm pag mechanize kasi mas efficient.
Thank you. Thank you. Between Senator Villar, who chairs our DA, and the Agriculture Committee and the subcommittee of the Committee on Finance on the Agriculture.
Them to answer about the CDA. Bakit ganon? Ano ba yung...
Ano yung tanong niyo na CDA?
Kasi, ang pagka-intindi ko ng CDA, they have
the SIDA.
CDA, Cooperative Development Authority.
What is the question again, ma'am?
Ang pagka-intindi ko doon, they're supposed to build cooperatives and help them manage cooperative, not give projects to existing cooperatives. Bakit yung binigay namin sa coconut industry, binigay nila sa isang cooperative yung lahat ng pera. That was meant to build cooperatives for the
How
coconut
much, ma'am?
industry.
Magkano po yung
250 million.
That's a big amount to give to one cooperative.
I
yeah.
just want them to answer what is your understanding of CDAs,
under-
Cooperative Development Authority, so we will not be confused that when we give money to CDA, they will use it to favor one cooperative and not build cooperatives, so there will be more, because we have to build cooperatives to develop the economies of scale, di ba?
Yes,
Kasi kung individual farm, walang mangyayari doon. There should
Can
be
anybody
cooperative.
respond from the economic managers? CDA now is under, budgetarily at least, is under the DTI. So, but does anyone know what is the policy, Your Honors?
Kasi may budget ka, to give projects to CDA. They're not supposed to give projects, they're supposed to build cooperatives and help them, the cooperatives, to manage themselves.
During their presentation, they gave a couple of reasons, apart from actually developing and creating cooperatives. One of the reasons that they presented is also to help them, because, ma'am, ang sabi po nila, there are different tiers of cooperatives. There are cooperatives po that are already up there, parang billionaires, parang yung mga already matured cooperatives, and there are also na cooperatives po na talagang really starting
To give 250 million to one cooperative in Mindanao. They did that.
They did it. Okay po.
So better be careful.
What we can do, ma'am, maybe if, of course, if the Congress will still retain the budget, maybe they should come up with guidelines on how to provide the money.
They have to build
grants.
cooperatives, and the cooperatives have projects coming from PhilMec, from High Value Crop Program, NDA, Philippine Carabao Center. They're not supposed to give projects to cooperative. They're supposed to form cooperative and help them manage cooperative, but never give projects, because there are agencies in the government which are giving projects to cooperative. Kaya ako nilagay siya doon para yung magbibigay ng project sa cooperative, may bibigyan cooperative kasi wala nga masyadong cooperative. And we have to develop that for economies of scale. Bakit binigay niya sa isang cooperative lahat ng pera at hindi siya nag-build ng cooperative? So you be careful, kasi pag binobola kayo paggawa ng budget, ina-abuse naman Oo. Kasi that's my experience.
Apo.
Okay, sige. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Villar. Sabi ko, between Senator Villar and Sec RC who's worked in the DA sector, baka pwede natin ayusin yung DA budget along the lines of what both of you mentioned. Thank you. Next is our Vice Chair, our Chair of the Senate Committee on Tourism, Senator Nancy Binay. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and magandang umaga po sa lahat ng bisita natin ngayong umaga. Siguro just maybe a continuation dun sa na-raise po na point ni Senator Villar pagdating ho dun sa importation. Kasi parang napapansin ko ho na parang there's an undeclared policy of just importing, whether it's agricultural products or supplies. Meron ho ba tayo, in fact, it was mentioned by the President during the SONA na magkakaroon tayo ng tatak Pinoy policy, na ang ating main proponent is our chairman. Meron ho ba tayo for next year's budget na mararamdaman na natin na we are trying to move towards mas tatangkilikin natin yung mga Pinoy products and not just do importation. Siguro sa site ko lang din na isang example, yung sa common supplies ho, yung toilet paper namin na ginagamit ngayon, sobrang mura ho siya, 7 pesos, made in China, pero pag ginamit nyo, dumidikit yung toilet paper sa kamay nyo. I don't know if you also have the same experience, dahil pare-pareho naman tayo kinukuhanan ng common supplies. And it may be cheap, but if we siguro procure locally manufactured toilet paper, it may be more expensive, pero yung quantity naman na magagamit natin nung product na yon would probably come out the same. So meron ho ba tayong ganong policy, whether it's common supplies or construction materials, na tangkilikin natin yung sariling atin.
Yeah. If I may, yeah.
For Secretary RC response, thank you to Senator Nancy and Senator Cynthia for bringing this up. Because pasok talaga ito dun sa tatak Pinoy. You'd think other countries parang common sense na sa kanila yun na talagang. And we have that DBM, di ba, Director Ruiz Secmina? We have that provision in the GPRA na kapag within a 15% band, yung cost differential, local and imported, pwedeng ibigyan ng favor or pwedeng tangkilikin yung local, di ba? May ganon. Just to clarify on the record. Kasi we put that in the budget every year. And it's just a reiteration of the GPRA provision. And it's always, the Malacanang always puts a conditional implementation. Ibang linalagyan ng conditions. Kailangan pa ba yung lagyan ng condition? Kasi batas yan di ba?
If I may, Mr. Chair, we do have domestic preference provision in RA 9184, and there's a provision implementing this in the implementing guidelines. However, let me note that the domestic preference provision is dependent on suppliers which will be able to acquire the DTI certification. Ang preference po natin yung bid or yung goods, hindi po yung supplier. So, kailangan po substantially locally produced or of local origin as certified by the DTI. Makikita po natin
Just to clarify, when you say substantially, he has to be a big producer. Kasi yan ang sinasabi ng mga, sa hearings namin, yun ang sinasabi ng mga iba. They're required, the GPRA requires them to have a certain track record or a certain number of supply contracts that are difficult to comply with for a new entrant into. So may barriers to entry, kumbaga.
If I may, Mr. Chair, hindi po. In fact, during the pandemic, marami pong bagong manufacturers na certify ng DTI. DTI po ay nag-identify ng substantially local bid. Again po, yung good, whether locally produced or of local origin.
Pero siguro, Mr. Chairman, hindi. Kasi you mentioned during the pandemic, in fact, we had a hearing kadugtong nung sa Pharmaly, yung mga textile industry natin, di ba, nag-shift sila to produce the PPEs, tapos dahil lang dun sa terms of reference na ginawa ng PSDBM ba or ng DOH, I don't know which agency, natalo tuloy yung mga local manufacturers natin, and we ended up buying PPEs from China.
Nung pong under Bayanihan 2, tinanggal po ng GPPB yung 15% margin. So, ibig sabihin po, kung meron kang domestic certificate, kahit po mas mataas yung bid mo, pwede po kayong ma-awardan ng kontrata during Bayanihan 2 because meron pong provision dun sa Bayanihan 2. But outside of Bayanihan 2, meron po tayong sinabi ni Senator Angara na 15% margin. So, it would really depend po kung meron kang domestic preference certificate. Pag tinignan po natin yung website ng DTI, meron lamang pong around 85 active suppliers na may domestic preference certificate. Kasama po dyan yung PPE, meron din po atang boots. Very, very limited po yung mga products.
Baka, Mr. Chairman, we need to maybe
have an information campaign among the local manufacturers.
and assistance kung paano sila magiging compliant.
And I think
to that.
maybe the bidding process, you must also notify. In the US, the military procurement, they inform at the start of the year or before the fiscal year. They tell, we're going to purchase so many number of missiles, so many number of whatever, body armor, whatever. Whatever is going to be purchased in bulk. So alam nung industry, the industry can react. The industries can react. Maybe we can do something along those lines, Director.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, in fact, we have what we call the indicative APP. So the year before pa lang po, required ang agencies to post not only in the PhilJEPs but also on their website. Ano yung mga pwede nilang bilhin next year? That's for the purpose of early procurement activities ng mga agencies. So we also do that. We also encourage procuring entities at the start of the year to conduct their own agency summit. Ibig sabihin, they will invite all of the suppliers, yung usual nila, yung suppliers sa mga kapitbahay nilang agency at explain nila ano ba yung mga nakasaad sa annual procurement plan nila para po ma-encourage din yung suppliers na mag-bid dun sa agency na yon when that time comes.
My apologies, I failed to acknowledge our Vice Chairs, Senator J.V. Erzito, our Chair of Local Government and Housing, and Vice Chair Senator Win Gatchalian, our Chair of Basic Education and Ways and Means. Apologies. Go ahead, Senator Binay.
Siguro, I don't know kung which secretary can answer the question. Pagdating ho dun sa...
Po, we have
Well, one is common use, but as a policy of the government, to kahit wala, pending pa yung bill, but it was already mentioned by the President, yung going towards that direction, natatak Pinoy, whether it's equipment for agriculture, yung produce, 'di ba? Yung mga sarili nating bawang, sibuyas, as a policy direction of the whole of government or as a country, na doon tayo papunta ngayon, na we will patronize our own products. And syempre for me, dapat magsimula doon sa government, yung procurement ng government. Tayo kumbaga, we should practice what we preach.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I will answer that policy part, and then my procurement can, the appropriate competent agency will respond to that. But a matter of policy or trade policy natin is that trade policy is used to enhance the working of the economy in such a way that we can stabilize prices, we can create employment, we can make our products more competitive, and so on and so forth. So napaka-importante yung trade policy. Let's give an example. If a particular sector is producing not enough to meet demand, for example, sugar, and that's causing prices to shoot to the sky, the trade policy is important there. You must have that flexibility of bringing in the supply to supplement the local production. So it's very important that all the players in the market, the stakeholders in the market, know clearly what the policy is, and you're correct. And the information is provided and available so that they can make those decisions early on in the game, even before the planting. For example, in the case of sugar, before the beginning of the year, they should know what's the prospects for the entire year, so that those traders and wholesalers, retailers can plan for their actions, no? And in that way, the future and present prices will stabilize. Ang nangyayari ko kasi trade players don't know what the future is, what will happen in the next 6 months. They don't know if government will allow them to import or will allow them to export. So, yung arbitrage na sinasabi natin, price arbitrage between time periods, hindi very inefficient. And of course, the economy suffers as a result of that. There will be less employment, there will be less production, there will be less exports, there will be less quality jobs. So it's that how important it is. And for us in the economic cluster, we are looking at this balancing of interests when it comes to policy, trade policy, that when we are protecting one sector, we must make sure that we know what the implications of that is for consumers, for our poverty reduction objectives, for our employment objectives, and for the performance of the other sectors that depend on that sector that is highly protected or protected. Ganun ho ang pagtingin namin sa
that's very well said, but we're not advocating a protectionist policy here, Sec RC. It's a market-driven policy. What we're asking is, what Senator Binay is saying, let's use the government and its vast resources and influence over markets to help Philippine industries be more competitive. That's what we are asking. We understand what you're saying. We adhere to market forces, supply and demand, by all means. But other countries have left us behind in terms of helping their local domestic industries. That is what we're emphasizing. We're not saying let's protect them at all cost, Sec RC, just to clarify.
And siguro, Mr. Chairman, just to add dun sa point to, hindi talaga to protect, it's to empower our local industries, diba? Kasi siguro sa side ko na lang ho dun sa agriculture, kaya yung mga farmers natin ayaw na, for example, yung mga tinamaan ng African swine flu, ayaw na nila mag-repopulate kasi hindi na nila kaya makipag-compete dun sa, mas malaki yung kita sa pag-i-import, diba? So, yung production nila, hindi nila talaga kayang makipagsabayan. So, parang ang perception ngayon is, import na lang tayo ng import kasi mas madali for everybody.
Senator Binay, the Philippine consumer is sophisticated now. He is willing to give that preference, all things being equal, quality being equal, cost being, he's willing to give a little adjustment. He or she is willing to give a little adjustment to Philippine locally made products. kailangan mag-level up yung gobyerno kasi yung consumer nagle-level up, yung local producers natin nagle-level up. Gobyerno na lang ang hindi nagle-level up sa totoo lang, Sec.
Yeah, I completely agree with that perspective, Your Honor. As we see from how other countries and from our experience, what must be done and what we should focus on really is number one, all efforts to raise productivity. That must be the basic concern, that we can, of course, get many more products, compete with those imported ones, and we can, provided that we can get those products cheaper, better quality, more competitive, and that's where the importance of number one, research come in, the assistance to technology come in, and coordination. I think that's what we are missing in many yung coordination ng government and the private sector, so that that matching of and scale economies can happen, because if there is no such coordination, lalo na sa atin ho, napakahirap yung coordination because of our geography, no, and the poor infrastructure. And so nangyayari, instead of may scale economies tayo sa production, sa agriculture for example, kung sana yung all these production areas are near the port, and so you can have but that's not the case for us. We are an archipelagic country, so we are more challenged than countries like Thailand or Vietnam when it comes to
Pero siguro, Secretary, for next year's budget, will we see this empowerment for our local industries?
That's the objective ho. That's the underlying premise here, that we
Yes, go ahead, Senator.
Some provision in the budget that we are encouraging local purchases. You have to give that provision sa budget natin, to the point na merong nakalagay sa ilalim na this agency should ganun. Something like that. Kasi pag sinabi mo lang dito sa mga implementor at wala kang provision na ganun, hindi susunod eh. Hindi susunod eh.
Okay lang naman sa amin ho, yun ho. Basta yung importante yung kulatilya na sinabi ni ng chair natin, na all other things remaining the same. Yung competitive naman yun. Because otherwise, kawawa naman ng mga users ng mahal na.
Still consumer driven, market force driven.
Right.
But let's help. In a sense, you're helping them, the producers, get that scale. You're mentioning scale, pero who else will help them if the government will not be the one to initiate? That's also what governments in other Southeast Asian countries do. They help aggregate yung sinasabi mong geographical difficulties. That's something we have to deal with. It's an indicator that we should work even harder because we have that inbuilt difficulty. It should not be made an excuse that why we cannot do it. It should be an incentive to us to work even harder, Sec.
Mr. Chairman, when it comes dun sa procurement.
Yes, that's why po, actually, you mentioned about yung sa annual procurement plan. We really push our agencies to really submit yung annual procurement plan and post it there para makita po natin yung total requirement ng national government. But as of now po, yung local government units, 20% lang po yung nagko-comply na mag-post ng kanilang annual procurement plan. And for national government, it's only 43%. I think it's also good that we push them to really put it there para makita po natin yung total na kailangan natin for a given year. And then, yes, the PSDBM po, at least for common use, and we will, may preferential naman po tayo for domestic production.
Tang natin yung nasa batas, di ba?
Yes
Kasi
po.
parang hindi na-implement ng maigi yun nung when we purchased. Kasi talagang the prices of PPEs was so high in other countries. And so Secretary Mon Lopez asked, yung sinasabi, example ni Sen. Nancy Binay, he really asked the textile manufacturers, sige, mag-switch na kayo dyan to manufacture face masks, etc. Tapos hindi tayo umorder sa kanila, di ba?
Siguro, pagdagdag lang, nakakatawa, yung local manufacturers natin, nag-export na lang sila ng PPE.
Mas mura.
Pinili ng ibang bansa, tayo
Kumuha.
pinangkilig yung sarili natin.
Maybe Attorney Executive Director Dennis Santiago can further explain.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Doon po sa policy po no, regarding po doon sa domestic preference as early as Commonwealth Act 138, mayroon naman po meron pong domestic bidder and domestic entity preference, though the domestic entity preference was repealed by the competition law. So what we have now is really the domestic bidder preference. And in-explain nga po kanina, meron siyang 15% they can make use of that with 15% no edge no against a foreign supplier no. Yung pong sa PSDBM naman po our products ma'am are we have recently revised our technical specifications, of course, to conform with the national standards, Philippine national standards. Yung nabanggit niyo po, ma'am, na tissue paper, meron po yung green parameters na po ay nagsusupply din po sa amin. Meron din pong eco-label. So perhaps ako ho mismo sa sarili ko sa opisina po ang ginagamit ko yung tissue paper na supply ng PS. So far hindi ko naman po na-experience yung dumidikit sa kamay. Baka ho
Mamaya, bibigyan kita ng sample.
baka check yun po ma'am. And then we are also looking at our empowering our suppliers, ma'am, looking at them as our partners no. This year nag-conduct na po kami ng two conferences, if you may, to guide them no, in their eligibility checking and also to help them win bids. No, po. Kasi marami hong nadi-disqualify because of the eligibility check. So we are guiding them essentially to pong mga local
Permission, just want to acknowledge the presence of our Vice Chair, Senator Bato de la Rosa, and our colleague, Senator Alan Cayetano, the Chair of the Committee on Science and Technology. Go ahead, Your Honors.
Siguro dun sa common supplies, anong porsyento dun yung imported na gamit? At anong porsyento dun yung locally manufactured? Would you have that data?
Mr. Chair, yung technical specifications po, for example, it's 100% recycled pulp. Yun po, ang nabatid din po namin na hindi po sapat ang supply ng recycled pulp here locally. So talagang sin-source out po nila ang materials sa labas. Even po ma'am yung papel po natin, A4, legal, yung raw materials po niya, wala hong sapat na supply locally. So kinukuha po, inaangkat po sa labas. Yung iba nga po, dumarating dito rolyo na, kinakat na lang po ng mga paper suppliers. So even that conforms with the Philippine National Standard, ma'am. So yung pong, we really leveled up our specifications.
Pero yun parang okay. Okay lang yun kasi may local component dahil dito kinakat or yung recycled dito naman minamanufacture. Ang concern ko is yung talagang made outside of the Philippines. Kumbaga, no local, di ba? Parang, kasi walang walang multiplier effects natin yung finished product na yun.
Yung po nga, may mga products po talagang outsource outside. Meron po talagang mga products na hindi ginagawa dito. Pero rest assured po, ma'am, na yung mga local suppliers po natin are well taken care of. As a matter of fact, we are guiding them even on how to bid. No? We are training them on that. Because hindi po, ma'am, sa supply, more on the rules, on eligibility check, on post-qualification, kaya sila hindi nakakasali. If you will notice, ma'am, yung pong sa yung nga po yung nag-repurpose na mga local manufacturers po natin. Actually, makakapag-comply po yung products nila. Ang hindi po sila nakapag-comply, doon po sa eligibility requirements natin. Even if they will apply...
May experience, yung X number of years.
Hindi po. Yung pong domestic preference at that time, ma'am, hindi po nila ma-apply.
Specify, Director, please, what you mean by eligibility requirements. Can you break it down, please?
Opo. The eligibility requirements po consist of the legal, the technical, and the financial eligibility requirements. Sa legal requirement po, you have SEC registration, you have po mayor's permit, or DTI registration, or CDA registration. Depende po kung sino yung sumasali. Okay? So that's legal. Yung pong technical eligibility will be the experience po. Nakapagkontrata na ba siya o nakagawa na ba siya ng proyekto na ganito ang halaga in the past for a certain period identified by the procuring entity. 3 years or 5 years. Yun naman pong financial...
Is that a legal, is that in the GPRA, yung 3 to 5 years?
Nasa IR.
Or that's in, yun ang sinasabi ng mga manufacturers. Why don't we make a gradation? Meaning, there's a window for them to enter. Hindi naman yung biglaan na, syempre, you cannot, and I understand the need for that requirement because you want to ensure the timely delivery of supply, di ba? Pero bigyan natin ng a window to enter for the small, the micro and small to enter. Na they will get that necessary experience. Parang sa job entry yan, di ba? If all companies require job entrants to have work experience, then none of the new graduates will get jobs. That's why the government created special programs for employment of students, Job Start, all of these programs, precisely so that they can meet that. So the government should also, in the case of bidding of domestic producers, should also give that window or that yung step up to local producers, di ba? Hindi yung kaagad 3 to 5 years. Oh.
Siguro, Mr. Chairman, just to add, baka certain volume, ganito lang yung years of
Limited.
experience.
If your contract is maybe 5 million, I don't know, I'm just hypothesizing, 5 million pesos and below, then why don't you give a chance to the small guys, di ba?
Mr. Chair, if I may clarify, wala po sa IRR yung number of years. Ito po ay ina-identify ng procuring entity. Halimbawa po katulad sa Napocor nung ako po ay board member, mas mahaba po yung period na kailangan namin kasi mga paggawa ng planta yon. Pero kung mga simpleng mga products lang po to or mga kontrata, hindi naman po kailangan matagal. So yung pong procuring entity ang nag-identify nun. Kaya nga po nung under the Bayanihan Act, nag-issue po ang GPPB ng rules na for the single largest completed, hindi pwede hong bagong entrant kasi nga precisely nag-remanufacture po yung mga textile companies to recognize that po para po maging effective yung Bayanihan 2 provision.
Alam mo, yung ibibigay mo ang power sa procuring authority, sila nga yung nagpapahirap para doon sa hindi nila gusto Oo. Nagrereklamo yung mga mga local producer, hindi sila makapasok kasi ini-invoke yung ganyan Oo. So maybe we should revise that na may special treatment yung local producer at saka yung mas maliliit, 'di ba? It should not be lahat ganon, 'di ba? Para naman matulungan natin yung mga not small, micro, and medium enterprises. Kasi sila nga nagpapahirap. Kasi yung sinabi sa akin nung nagawa ng organic fertilizer sa Batangas, in-invoke daw yan kaya hindi sila makasupply sayang din yon kasi chicken manure, malaki rin yun sa kanila. And that will really help them increase their income. So I guess it should not be standard for all. There should be some leniency para sa small, micro, and local producer. Kasi I understand national power because that's very highly technical. But yung mga fertilizer lang oo, depende, di ba? You have to make that policy.
Let's put that in our review of the GPRA.
Yes po. But while we are working on the amendments of GPRA, in the meantime po, I asked Attorney Weng if nagawa nila sa Bayanihan. Of course, wala na po yung COVID-19 pandemic. So maybe we can work on a new
mainstream that already.
IRR
It's a very commendable
for that.
what you did, Director Weng, Director Dennis, no? Very commendable yon na binigyan nyo ng palugit. Sana i-mainstream na natin, wag
Opo.
lang in times of emergency.
And yun po yung sinabi ni Senator Nancy, maybe merong range po, if ganito lang yung quantity.
Or
baka
smaller
pwede po.
numbers, yeah.
Let baby steps.
The risk of default there is not
It's very low
is low, and then it does not really prejudice us to a great degree.
Sige. Thank you. Moving on to another topic. Sec Amina, last August 9, DBM issued circular letter number 2023-10 requesting for agencies to submit their catch-up plans. What prompted this circular?
If you will, ma'am, Mr. Chair, if you will notice po dun sa presentation ni Secretary R.C. Balisacan on our GDP rates for second quarter, one of the reasons po kung bakit bumaba yung ating, I guess the economy as a whole is yung contribution po ng government spending, negative po siya. So when we studied po kung bakit ganon, may underspending po tayo sa ating mga national government agencies. So we asked them to prompt up.
Can you identify which agency, siguro top 5 or top 3 underspending
To
government
date
agencies?
po, ang obligation rate, meaning yung of your total budget na na-release na po sa inyo, ang na-obligate nyo pa lang doon for all the national government agencies po is only 50%. Now, if we will disaggregate it for yung top agencies po, this is as of June 30, 2023. DICT po, obligation rate is, again, percent of obligations over allotments. DICT, 9.2%. Department of Migrant Workers, 14.3%. Other executive offices, 18.4%. Commission on Elections, 26.1%. Department of Agrarian Reform, 28.9%. Department of Social Welfare and Development, 34.2%. DOE, 34%. Yan po. Department of Energy, 34%. Office of the Press Secretary, 34%. Department of Tourism, 35%. Yun po. We can provide po and it's online po. Yung,
And then, ano yan, may deadline kayo for
before September 15 po.
for the agencies
To submit their catch-up plans.
So as we discuss the budget of the different agencies, more or less may submission na sila dun sa catch-up
Yes, ma'am.
plans nila.
Yes, ma'am, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And then, siguro dun sa DPWH, di ba siya yung agency tasked with most of our infrastructure works. Pero meron, usually sila din yung underspender. But parang dun sa listahan mo, hindi masyado, no?
Yes po, medyo malaki din po if we will disaggregate po based on their major projects and programs. Meron din po kaming listahan on that.
Pero hindi kaya din nagiging dahilan nung underspending nila is yung kakulangan nila ng staff. Kasi di ba nakikita, every budget, laging ang laki nung unfilled positions. Hindi kaya din ito dun sa isang component kung bakit merong underspending yung mga ahensya.
For DPWH po, we have provided them enough workers, at least for the Build Better More program. Nag-request po sila, but since it's project-based po, JO at saka COS po yung nature ng mga trabaho po
For example,
na pinrovide
DICT.
namin. DICT, wala naman request DICT, no? I think yung DICT po, we can better ask them po sa budget po nila. They have
Kung bakit ang baba
baba
nung-
po, opo.
Okay. Yun na lang muna, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you.
Very much, Senator Nancy. Makakatulong ho dyan, Sec, ba yung right sizing dun sa giving, when you plan to right size, kasi pinag-uusapan naming mga senador, and Sec Ben has been advocating that even since his days in the DBM. Sana magawa na natin na we delegate a certain amount of leeway to you to streamline the agencies. Pinag-aaralan nyo na ba yan? Is there a plan, meaning what is the optimal number of, ano yung pinakamagandang numero ng mga empleyado sa bawat ahensya? At sino yung mga kulang, sino yung mga sobra, etc.
Siguro,
Yeah.
just to add, Mr. Chairman, baka nga the word right sizing, kasi di ba parang it invokes mga negative.
Hindi, dati nga downsizing, kaya nga ginawang right sizing.
Ah.
Dati kasi downsizing yun eh.
Kasi di ba parang ang dating nagbabawas, when hindi ba supposed to be, it's a rationalization
Sabi ng
of
Yusek
the
ko,
staffing.
baka optimizing daw po. Kasi I
Baka,
think
yeah.
more than the...
Ekonomista talaga.
Opo, ekonomista. Optimizing daw po. Kasi I think more than yung magtatanggal ka ng mga certain offices or
Thank you.
bureaus within a department, I think it's important to note also na kasi as of now, since we're in the, for example lang po, in the area, in the
With
age
your permission, just to recognize our Chair of Energy and Migrant Workers, Senator Rafi Tulfo. Good morning, sir.
in the age of digitalization and modern technology, nagiging piecemeal approach po kasi yung mga request ng mga agencies if they want to create their own offices po that can cater into IT. And then those that are already ready, na may IT na sila, dadating naman po yung bago nilang request for cybersecurity naman. So I think maganda rin pong part ng ating right sizing and ano nga tawag mo? Optimizing the bureaucracy is to really standardize po yung
Sige,
mga
pag-isipan nyo na yung pangalan.
offices.
Pangalan lang naman pinag-usapan. Pag-isipan nyo na, pero pareho rin yun.
Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman, last na lang. Kasi di ba
Go ahead.
during the budget presentation, ang laki nung tinaas for ICT and digitalization, it's 60%. And then the well, during the time of President Aquino and then the time of President Duterte, we had that program, yung MITHI. Ano ba to? Is this a continuation of that program? Or it's a totally
yung
different
MITHI po
project?
kasi nawala po siya. So we are trying to are we going to revive it, no? We're going to revive it na po.
Pero
Opo.
ano ba yun, yung target for MITHI, na-fulfill ba natin yun?
Parang hindi po.
Yung sinasabi ni Sen. Binay, sana may
Parang hindi
finish
po.
line yung
Nag-stop
program.
po kasi at a certain part.
Never-ending
At a certain time.
computerization siya, di ba? I understand. That's the demand of modern life, di ba? You have to
Hindi,
update your
and
technology.
siguro-
Pero yung digitalization, computerization,
Sen,
dapat may roadmap
dapat
na
may
medyo...
milestone tayo di ba? For example, sa side ko na lang yung BIR, parang every budget na lang nila, merong component dun sa digitalization, and then parang in one budget hearing, I raised an issue dun sa connectivity ng mga different RDs. Tapos parang ang balik sa akin kasi kulang pa daw yung program, hindi daw na budgetan. So parang ano ba talaga yung, how much would it really cost to finish a certain IT component of an agency? Para hindi naman tayo forever na may ganitong component.
Yan po, kasama na po yan doon sa bagong MITHI.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Pia also had 5 minutes left and she was ahead of the queue. But so I want to ask before Senator De La Rosa, where's Senator Alan? He stepped out of the room? He stepped out. Okay, anyway, next on the queue is our Vice Chair, Senator Bato De La Rosa. And before I acknowledge him, just to put the order, it's after Senator Bato, it's Senator Risa, Senator JV, Senator Win, Senator Jinggoy, Senator Tulfo, Vice Chair Senator Poe. Vice Chair De La Rosa, you have 10 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is addressed to Secretary Jokno, sir. Sir, during a press briefing, when asked about the current MUP pension system, Secretary Jokno was quoted saying, "It is not sustainable, and if it goes on, there will be a fiscal collapse." Can you explain to us what is the meaning of fiscal collapse? How will this happen? What will be the signs that tell us that we are experiencing fiscal collapse?
Thank you, Your Honor. At that time, our estimate of the military pension is the liability there was already 9 trillion pesos, Your Honor. But that has to be updated. I don't know, maybe it's around, what's the most recent estimate? 5 trillion. And that's a big part of that's a big component of our GDP is maybe around 20 trillion. So you can imagine, right? And the pension system that is for the military is not a real pension system in the following sense. There are no contributors. A pension system is where the beneficiaries of the pension system contribute to the system, and there is a government counterpart, okay? But in this particular sense, there is no contribution on the part of the beneficiaries. And we only appropriate it annually, Your Honor. You appropriate annually. And this started during the term of President Ramos, Your Honor. And many presidents tried to correct it because it is not sustainable in the sense that you cannot have a pension system where there are beneficiaries but no contributors, right? And so you had ERAP, you had GMA for 10 years, and then you had Pinoy, and then you had Duterte. And so I think this president now has accepted that we really need to address it. Otherwise, it will become a huge component of the national budget, Your Honor. That is when I say that is the meaning of unsustainable, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Halimbawa, sir, hindi maipasa yung MUP pension reform bill. Tapos, Dahil hindi nakapasa yung MUP
I think
bill.
if you let this to continue, I think the next administration will be faced with a huge problem. Okay. In fact, the current situation now, Your Honor, is that the amount that we allocate for the military pension is much higher than the current operating budget of the military.
Yes, sir.
Ganun po kabigat na po.
So meaning, sir, it will take, kung next administration, it will take around more than 4 years bago magko-collapse yung ating economy.
Ngayon
Bago
pala,
magkakaroon ng fiscal collapse.
Right now, Your Honor, we are in a kaya nga po tayo nagkaroon ng medium-term fiscal framework kasi because of the pandemic, tumaas na po yung debt service natin. Debt as a percent of our GDP, tumaas na po to around 61%, no? Dati po nasa 40% lang yan. So, kaya ang unang-una hong action ni Presidente Marcos Jr. ay yung fiscal consolidation. Kasi we have to go back to where we were before, after the crisis. Kaya yun, tinitingnan po yan ng mga rating agencies, no? Kasi kung patuloy po nating i-ignore yung military pension system, baka po yung ating investment grade ngayon na sa mga rating agency, baka po yan maging junk po tayo. It will be more difficult for us to finance our budget, borrow money, and it will be also difficult for the private sector to borrow money.
Yes, sir. Kaya nga I am soliciting your opinion, ikaw mang expert dito, para naman ma-convince ko yung mga kasamahan ko na ipasa na natin itong MUP Pension Reform Bill dahil sabi ni Secretary Jokno, next administration, fiscal collapse na tayo.
Salamat po. Ang magandang balita po, sir, magandang balita po, meron hong technical working group sa lower house, headed by Joey Salceda, and they just have a win-win situation po. Agree po kami dun sa version na yon at version po ng Kongreso. Pag I think pinasa na nila, no? Pinasa na nila. Pag pinasa nyo po, solve na ho tayo.
Depende yan. Depende. We cannot assume right away na everything that is being passed to us by the House of Representatives ay automatically papasaya sa Senado. That will go through mabigat pa na deliberasyon yan.
Nakita ko po, sir, yung version. I think that is fairly acceptable. And that is a result of extensive consultation na po with all the branches of the military, PNP, sa mga other uniform personnel. Yun na po, after extensive consultation, yun naging produkto na po yun.
Okay.
Ng,
Thank you, sir. We will wait for that. Once it is passed to us from the lower house, titingnan natin. So, meron ba tayong ibang measure, sir, na being undertaken to ensure fiscal sustainability and responsible financial management in the 2024 National Expenditure Program other than the proposed MUP pension reform?
Marami po. In fact, this is part of what is called medium-term fiscal framework na inadapt po natin ng executive and it also adopted by both houses of Congress. And as far as we're concerned, on track ho tayo. And it consists not only of the military pension reform, but also some of the tax measures na kailangan nating ipasa. And of course, on the collection of revenues naman, we're okay. And of course, we're limiting the deficit po. I think for this year, we're limiting the deficit to 5.1% of the economy. And our target is that we will limit it to 3%. Babalik ho tayo dun sa 3% before the pandemic po. So, we're as I said, yun ho ang unang-una talagang ginawa natin para to give confidence to the outside world that we are in control. Yung tawag ko doon, fiscal consolidation program. First ho na nangyari sa Pilipinas yun at first time din po na in-approve ng both houses of Congress.
Kaya ko tinanong yan, sir, dahil nga, ang dating sa mga kasundaluhan at mga uniform personnel, para tayo tuloy ang magiging cause ng paghihirap ng Pilipinas kung talagang magkakaroon ng fiscal collapse. So yun ang iniisip nila eh. They were threatened by the term fiscal collapse. Ayaw rin naman talaga natin na magiging rason tayo na bumagsak yung gobyerno ng Pilipinas dahil dyan sa MUP to my next question. The defense sector is allocated with only 4.9% of the national government budget, or 282.757 billion. Do you think this is enough reflection of the President's pronouncement that we will not surrender any part of our territory to any foreign country? Kuha na ba ito? Adequate na ba ito? Or what do you think, sir?
That is much higher than the previous year's budget, Your Honor.
How much was previous year's budget? Defense budget?
Nag-increase na nila.
Tayo defense sector. For D&D po, wala pa po ako. Nasaan yung sa Department of Defense din to eh. Diba? For D&D po, we posted an increase po. In fact, in 2023 GAA, it's 210 billion pesos, but for 2024 proposed po, it's 233 billion pesos po. Much of the increase po dito is yung sa AFP, revised AFP modernization program, because in 2023 GAA po, it was only 27.5 billion, and then we binalik po namin siya sa level na 50 billion for 2024 as previous years po.
Thank you, ma'am. Can we get the percentage as compared to the national government budget? Ito ngayon kasi 4.9. Was last year only 4.5 or 3 point something? So that will know the increase. If it was, dahil ngayon 4.9 last year.
If we will look po the proposed budget for 2024 by sector po, it will post an increase po of 4.9. The share po is 4.9%. Tumaas po siya from this year's 4.4% as a share of the total budget po.
Thank you for that increase, ma'am. But I think yung increase na yan is a reflection yung sinasabi nyo palagi na inflation rate na kinukonsider nyo, kaya nag-i-increase ang budget every year. I'm not an economist, kaya tatanong ko yan sa inyo. But anyway, ma'am, ganito. Nagkaroon ba kayo ng comparison with other yung mga ASEAN neighbors natin, especially Vietnam? Ito kasi yung bansa na hindi basta-basta nabubuli ng China pagdating dyan sa West Philippine Sea or sa South China Sea. Itong Vietnam, gaano kalaki yung kanilang defense spending as compared to ours? Kasi kung po pwedeng i-approximate natin yung kanilang commitment ng gobyerno nila towards sa defense budget, then baka po pwedeng dandahan nating kopyahin. Meron ba kayong study yan kung gaano kalaki yung sa Vietnam?
Wala po kami existing data, but we can look for it po, and then we'll try to compare po, and then maybe in the future budget po, baka pwede po natin mahabol po
Okay.
Kaya po.
With your permission, Your Honors, I just want to acknowledge the presence of one of the committee vice chairs, Senator Francis Tolentino, our Senate Justice and Blue Ribbon Chair. Good morning, sir. Go ahead, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that answer, ma'am. Now, I'll just give you a hypothetical situation, ma'am, no, sirs. Ganito, nakikita ko dito, yung proposed budget by sector sa social services, 37.9%. Economic services, 29.6%. Debt burden, 12.1%. General public services, 15%. Defense, pinakakawawa, pinakamaliit, 12.9%. Now here's a hypothetical question. Halimbawa, ako ang presidente. Then kayo pa rin kasi magagaling kayo na economic team eh. Kayo pa rin gagawin kong members ng economic team. Sabihin ko sa inyo, sir, Secretary Jukno, I am the president, ha? Social justice natin masyadong malaki. 37.9%. Pwede mo bang tanggalin yung tail niya na 0.9%? Idagdag mo sa defense para magiging 6 something. Yung economic services, bawasan mo yan ng, halimbawa, 2%. Idagdag mo sa defense. Debt burden, huwag na natin galawin yan. Baka hindi tayo pautangin pag binawasan natin yan. Hindi na tayo papautangin. General public services, bawasan mo ng konting porsyento. Ilagay mo sa defense. Is it feasible? Is it doable? Granting, ako presidente ha. Sabihan ko kayo, you do this, you do that.
To remind everyone, Senator Bato was the presidential candidate of PDP Laban. And he was accompanied by Senator Tolentino to the COMELEC when he filed. Kumakain pa ho siya ng spam nun, pero nung ina-inform siya na siya yung presidential candidate ng PDP Laban.
Nagulat ako, Mr. Chairman. Presidentiable pala ako. Nagulat pa ako, ha? But anyway, that was history. Yun lang, sir. Given that hypothetical situation, kaya niyong gawin yan?
Your Honor, if you were the president, it can be done, but I will have to explain to you why it's difficult to do it.
Yes, sir.
Because
Please explain.
a big part of our citizen right now is are the young, and we have to educate them, provide them health care, social protection, so we can develop them into a productive workforce. So yun po ang ating ace. We have a very young population. Median age is 25. And in an aging world, yun po ang importante po sa atin. So I will argue that we should continue to provide for social services. And we'll, of course, since you're the president, I will do my best to comply.
Yes, sir. You were the DBM secretary when President Duterte ordered you na dublehin mo yung sweldo ng
Dinoble ko po, di ba?
kapulisan. Di ba? Dinoble mo. And we were very thankful to you. Salamat, sir. Maraming salamat. Pero ngayon, ikaw rin nagsasabi na dapat yung pensyon ng military mag-contribute na sila. MUP, ikaw rin nagsabi. So,
Pero sinabi ko rin po yung kay President Duterte that there's a risk, that it's not sustainable.
Alam ko, sir, how good you are because you've been through administrations. Kaya magaling ka. Kaya pag ako, ito nga, hypothetical situation, ako presidente, ikaw pa rin yung aking Secretary of Finance. At yun nga ang aking...
Baka hindi na niya tanggapin kasi mahirap na masyado yung trabaho. Sen ba to?
Kaya nga, sir, kung halimbawa, yan, you argue to me that hindi po pwede yan, sir, dahil ganito, ganun. Sabihin ko sa'yo, hindi naman yan totally tanggalin. Bawasan mo lang ng kunti. Idagdag mo sa defense para makabili tayo ng barko na may malaking powerful na yung pump, malang water pump na pag binuhusan tayo ng tubig ng China, ng Chinese ship, maka-respond tayo, tubig sa tubig. Bakbakan tayo sa tubig dito. Then, yun lang naman ako, sir, ha? Awang-awa na tayo sa ating mga puwersa doon. Forgive me. My heart goes to the MUP because I've been there, done that, and so my people dying before my eyes during encounters with the enemy. Kaya kung itong pambabastos ng China, na simpleng tubig lang, wala tayong panglaban, kawawa naman talaga yung ating Coast Guard, kawawa yung ating Navy. Kaya sana, ang akin lang appeal sa'yo, if I were the President, Secretary Jokno, tanggalan mo lang ng konti sa dulo yan, idagdag mo sa defense. Yung nga, despite your resentment, despite your yung lahat ng mga argumento mo, sabihin ko, no, tanggalan mo yan, lagay mo dyan. Kaya, sir? Kaya? Ha? Kaya?
Kung ikaw ang presidente, done. It will be
Yun.
done.
Sige, hintayin natin. Maging presidente ako at palakihin ko itong hindi, wala akong pangarap maging presidente, ha. Gusto ko lang talagang makalaban yung ating mga tao doon. Ay, napakakawawa talaga. So, dagdagan natin kunti para ngayon, sir, ito, at our level, pasimple lang tayo. Halimbawa, I am the one defending the defense budget. I am the one defending it on the floor. At my level, sabihin ko, hindi kayo mag-argue kung sabihin ko na, sir, pwede natin tanggalan ito konti, dagdag dito. Kaya, sir? Hindi kayo magre-revolusyon? DBM.
Hindi na po, sir, ako budget secretary.
Yung budget, yes. At least, kayo pa rin kukonsultahin eh. Kayo ang economic team eh. Kayo ang economic team, so magkukonsultahan pa rin kayo. Yun lang ba? Ako'y nakikiusap para sa ating mga sundalo, ating mga Navy, yung ating mga Coast Guard nandoon na para nagkawawa. Palagi na, tinatanong ko, anong masasabi mo, General Bato, Senator Bato? Ang ako po ma-advise, ating mga Coast Guard dyan, please exercise maximum restraint, maximum patient. Huwag kayong mag-start ng war. Huwag kayong lumaban, huwag niyong putukan yan ng baril dahil it will start a world war kapag magsimula yan. So sabihin ng ating mga Coast Guard, hanggang ganyan na lang yung, sir, hanggang ganyan na lang yung magagawa mo, pakiusap sa amin, senador ka man, dapat mag-allocate kayo ng pondo para sa amin, makabili man lang kami ng malaking water cannon na panglaban o kaya yung laser. Kasi nabubulag na kami, sir, tinamaan yung mata namin. Liliserin rin namin yung mga insect na yan para may panglaban kami. So, yun lang, sir, sa akin. Baka pwedeng, I am the one defending the defense budget.
Senator Bato,
yes.
Vice Chair, Senator Villar is asking how much ba yun? Magkano ba yun? Mukhang magdo-donate siya eh. Magkano daw yun?
Well, ito lang naman, as senators, yun lang naman ang aming may tulong sa mga sundalo natin, mga Navy, mga sailors at mga Coast Guard na nandun ngayon sa West Philippines. Kawawa. Makita mo yung sitwasyon ng BRP Sierra Madre. Kung makita mo, how many years na sila nakatira doon, yung mga Marines natin. So, parang akong, galing ako dyan sa sektor na yan, tapos ngayon, senador na ako ngayon, wala mo lang ako mai-contribute para ma-alleviate yung buhay nila doon sa mga puro kalawang na Sierra Madre. Sana magtutulungan tayo. Yun lang naman sa akin. Matulungan natin sila.
Magkano yun?
Magkano?
Sir, hindi po, tinatanong ko po yung staff. Mr. Chair, yes po, naintindihan po namin yung need, especially now. That's why, given our limited fiscal space, we still tried to increase the budget po of our defense sector. In fact, the share is from 4.4 to 4.9%. And ganun din po sa Philippine Coast Guard because we understand during the budget deliberations po is that meron po silang mga barko pero wala pong ammunitions yung mga barko po natin. That's why we also provided a sum for that para po makabili sila ng ammunition po para sa mga barko nila. But we also asked them na siguro po in the future, maybe proper planning also is necessary because when you buy something, sana po kumpleto para mapondohan po natin lahat. Because yung previous years po, they just bought the boat, wala pong ammunition, and then they will tell us kulang yung ammunition. So, maybe yun po. So, siguro po in our future budget deliberations and when they present their budget, we'll have a clearer picture po of what they need exactly. But we try to put budget po for the ammunitions po ng mga existing na mga barko na meron po yung Philippine Coast Guard.
Okay na sa akin yun, na marinig coming from you that your mind is on the budget and your heart is on the feeling of our Filipino sailors and Marines na nandoon sa West Philippine Sea. Medyo okay na sa akin yun at least we are on the same page, we are all Filipinos. Sana tulungan natin talaga sila doon. Yun lang nga apila ko sa inyo. At to move forward, matanong ko lang ma'am kung yung budget utilization rate ba ng Defense at Armed Forces, okay ba? Baka mamaya, yun na naman ang gagawin yung rason bakit hindi nyo binibigyan ng additional budget dahil ang kanilang budget utilization rate ay mababa. Wala pa, wala. Anyway, pero mataas, sir, mataas. Ay, salamat naman. Salamat naman kung mataas.
Mataas po, it's almost 60% po yung obligation rate and 75% po yung disbursement rate. So mataas po.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Mr. Chair, ilang minutes pa ako?
Actually, you consumed 12 minutes.
12 na?
Yeah, of the allowed 10, Your Honor.
Okay. So, isa na lang, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Isa lang,
Yeah.
Ma'am, based on the recent family income and expenditure survey, the province that saw the biggest increase in poverty incidence among population were Region 7 with 9.88% point increase. Mimaropa with a 5.71% point increase, and Region 1 with a 4.5% point increase. May we know how did the economic managers factor this in preparing the 2024 budget? Nag-factor in ba ito, ma'am, o wala? Hindi ito na bigyan ng pansin. Mas dumami ang mahirap, ang naghirap doon sa Region 7. 9.88 point increase yung kanilang poverty incidence. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, yes, because particularly for the DSWD projects, because these are targeted, we used poverty status of the household or the individual as basis for targeting. So regions that have high incidence of poverty will get the proportionate share of that budget. For infrastructure, again, as I mentioned yesterday, our trust is to interconnect our regions so that those lagging areas of the country, lagging regions, are connected to those leading regions in such a way that growth will become more inclusive and so prosperity will become more inclusive. So overall, Mr. Chair, yes, there is that indication in the budget and in the overall Philippine Development Plan.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, thank you, and sorry for my overspending.
No, it's okay.
Overspending
Okay
of
lang
this
ho, okay
committee's
lang
time.
po. The chair wants to be liberal with especially with the vice chair, so they can.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
for
Chairman.
asking the very important issues.
Sir, maraming salamat, sir, sa inyo.
Salamat, Mr. President. Pagtakbo mo, wag mo kami kalimutan, Sen Bato. Pagka presidente ka na. Next is, si Senator Alan can use the time of Senior Vice Chair Senator Pia. Go ahead,
you,
Senator Alan.
Thank you,
After Senator Risa, Senator JV, Senator Win.
Gandang umaga, dear colleagues, Mr. Chairman. Sundan ko lang po yung kay Senator Bato. I will share with him the advice of my father. Don't talk to strangers, don't argue with economists, at wag kang sumama sa police pag walang warrant of arrest. Okay? So, this person is known as the Mr. Peace and Order. Here in the Senate, isang Mr. No yung kanyang mga hinihingi. But to those who are 65 and above, he's known as Mr. Clean. Yan po. Okay. So, Puera Biro, Mr. Chairman, point of a personal privilege lang po. Sa Taguig po kasi, unfortunately, very unfortunately po, nagkabarilan yung 2 pulis dahil na-late po yung isang pulis na Muslim. Akala po nung mga tao absent. So, nagluto ng pork. So, nung nagkainan, akala sadya, nagkabarilan. So, may I make a privilege motion that all throughout the budget hearing, in respect to our mga kapatid na Muslim in government, let's not serve any pork na lang. Kasi I noticed they have to ask nilapitan ko po si
Well taken, Your
Rubio.
Honor. Well
So,
taken.
with your permission.
We will please COMSEC and to
Yeah.
the staff.
I'm sure they don't serve
That's a
pork
very
to
good
the Muslim,
suggestion.
but para lang hindi na sila kailangan magtanong man lang, wag na lang tayo mag-serve ng pork. Brutal, kahit anong gawin natin, hindi rin naman magbibigay si Sec Mina ng pork barrel. So, wag na rin tayo magbigay ng pork.
According to the staff, Senator Alan, we've not been serving pork for the last few years. At may request din si Senator Cynthia na we serve vegetables also.
So, chicken yung...
Preferably organic, sabi niya.
So, chicken tong sausage? May sausage kasi.
Yun, is that chicken? It's beef, Your Honor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But para lang hindi magtanong kasi ako mismo nung nakita kong sausage, sabi ko pork ba yan? But anyway, Mr. Chairman,
It's pork po, hindi ako binigyan kasi daw po pork.
bigyan na lang ng fork yan, hindi na pork. Okay. Assalamualaikum, dear Secretary. Magandang hapon po. Magandang umaga po. You know, I love the verse from Jeremiah 29:11. And it's so inclusive kasi po ang Muslim, ang Kristiyano at ang Hudyo ay pare-pareho pong tinuturing na prophet si Jeremiah. No? Sabi dito, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Napakasarap pakinggan na ang Diyos ay may plano para sa atin. And if I'm not mistaken, can we go to the next slide? That the national budget is actually the fulfillment or the execution or the funding of a big plan. No? But I always remind students, kung ang Diyos may plano sa atin, ang demonyo may plano din. Diba? Ang plano ng demonyo, na dun galit po si Senator Bato, to cheat, to steal, and to kill. Diba? Okay, next slide. So, because we have limited time, maikli lang to. Actually, this is not, hindi pregnant questions po to. This is actually going to help me throughout the budget hearing. And these are just preliminary questions that I will really ask more on the departments. But being the Budget Coordinating Council, just fill in the blanks, no? So tama po ba, no, that when we make the budget, we input, of course, we start with the preamble, di ba, the aspiration of the Filipino people's Constitution, and then certain principles, di ba, like prioritizing education, the youth, family, and then you have Philippine Development Plan. So for example, no, sa Philippine Constitution, life starts at conception. So we do not fund abortion. We do not allow abortion, di ba? So then I heard both the NEDA Secretary and the Finance Secretary talk about the medium-term development plan, the Philippine Development Plan yesterday. Of course, any utterance of the President regarding policy becomes part of the policy, yung kanyang priority, and then of course other existing laws, and then policy statements of the President. Have I missed out on anything? Ano po ba ang, is there any study or any plan that the DBCC also takes into account when we make the budget?
Under the medium-term fiscal framework, there's an 8-point socio-economic agenda. And when we prepare the budget, we also look at the TRIP, yung three-year rolling infrastructure program. We also look at the roadmap, it's there, of all the respective departments and agencies. And we also look into the ISSP po. Yun po yung parang roadmap of sorts din po ng that DICT approves per agency po in terms of their ICT.
So thank you for that answer. Because yan ang gagamitin ko naman when I ask the other departments kung in furtherance yung budget nila nung mga framework na binigay nyo. And blinangko ko rin number 7 because of course in the BICAM, i-input nyo rin yung gusto ng two houses of Congress based on the arguments and the deliberation. No? So next slide. I just want to make clear, I don't think I'll have time for all of this, but this is what I wanted sana to discuss this morning. Equalization of opportunities. All of us are still born in a country na your last name matters. Kung pinanganak ka na ang pangalan mo ay Ayala or C or Tan, diyan ba si Tita Cynthia Villar, no? Gatchalian, no? Or it also matters where you were born, di ba? If you were born in Marawi, especially during the siege, if you were born in Batanes, na very prone sa bagyo, it really matters, di ba? That's why government is there as a second parent, di ba? To try to equalize opportunity. So, I wanted to touch on education, access to capital, and Secretary Diokno and mine favorite, ayuda, although we come from different spectrums of how to use it, but we do both believe in that it is necessary at times, no? Accountability, a budget vis-a-vis the plan, and I'll discuss that more with the departments. Transparency measures like double appropriation. So, Madam Secretary, I want to ask you later kasi 2003, mahigit 2 billion pa rin yung double appropriations. Binanggit ko yon before the hearing, pagkuha pa lang ng NEP, the hearings here, pero after the BICAM, meron pa rin double appropriation. No? Simple lang ang hiningi ko sa kanila, lagyan nyo ng phase 1 o phase 2 o lagyan nyo ng kilometers, pero hindi pa rin parang Xerox. No? So, para I don't delay you, mamaya, can I ask, maybe in the next hearing or pag DBM na yung hearing, I will give you the list. What I want to know is, pareho bang na-obligate yun at parehong na-release o isa lang, no? So if there are two appropriations exactly the same, 150 million Ayala Boulevard, Ayala Avenue, 150 Ayala Avenue, what happened to the two? Ito na ilabas, ito hindi. No? Just for transparency. Again, for those who are listening to us, especially in the internet, no, hindi DBM to, DPWH to. But because this is the Budget Coordinating Council, I wanted to see, no. And siguro one question on that. Wala pang software na when you come up with the budget, pagka-eksakto makikita. So ano pa rin tayo? Human editing pa rin? Pang AI para dyan?
Wala pa po. Hindi pa po bago yung software, I think, na ginagamit po nila during the BICAM. That's why Symphony, it's still Symphony. It's an old system that they use. So, pag tinype po, unlike actually a regular Excel file or a Word file, makikita po yung, di ba magla-line pag doble po. Pero yung system po yata, hindi po nakikita.
And for those listening, if we had enough time for everything, madaling sabihin ni edit, but between the BICAM and the printing, nagmamadali ka na because pag ma-delay sa January, it has effects, no, sa our economy and spending. So maybe, Mr. Chairman, that's one reason why if we can finish earlier and have a little bit more time to go through the BICAM, or at the very least, so far naman DPWH lang I guess dahil sa laki ng pondo at sa dami ng projects. No? So then the last item I want to discuss is the role of the DBCC and DBM. So let me go first to one of the great equalizers according to Horace Mann, and many people, including myself, have been quoting this, no, without attributing. Let's attribute it to him, Horace Mann. Next slide. Article 14, Section 5 of the Constitution. The state shall assign the highest budgetary priority to education and ensure that teaching will attract and retain its rightful share of the best available talents through adequate remuneration and other means of job satisfaction and fulfillment. So 2 points about this. Number 1, we all siguro agree na pagka yung education system natin becomes number 1, talagang gaganda ang buhay ng mga Pilipino. Much more opportunities, di ba? In Taguig, we have 800, 900 million peso scholarship, 88,000 scholars. Wala nang pinipili. Basta pag-graduate mo, automatic 15,000 pesos. Pag honor, 10,000 pesos more. If you're a priority school or course, up to 50,000. So we used to have 20 students in UP Diliman. Now we have at least 700 at any point in time because they get 50,000, no questions asked. And if you are a police, Senator Bato, or teacher assigned in Taguig, you can get 120,000 for masteral. No? So my point in this is I want to take a quick look on education, just on the policy. No? Next slide. And DPWH under the NEP will get 821 billion, but DepEd will only get 758.6. So would it be correct to say mas mataas ang infrastructure at DPWH sa education or sa DepEd, Madam Secretary?
Yung pag tinignan po natin yung total education sector, not just the DepEd, but kasama po yung higher education, mas mataas pa rin po yung education sector than the DPWH po.
I knew you were going to answer that, so next slide, please. No, marami kasing nagtatanong, so I wanted to spare you the having to repeat it in all of your interviews and all of the hearings, no? Because nung pinasa yung Constitution, Department of Education, Culture and Sports, di ba? Hindi pa CHED, TESDA, and DepEd, which is the work of the sponsor and author is, of course, Senator Angara, and you know, I worked with him on the opposite side sa K-12, but his passion was really on education. Senator Pia, my dad, myself were all chairman of the Senate Committee on Education. So yes, mas mataas pag pinagsama mo 910 to 821. I just have a caveat. Next slide, please. In the NEP of 2023, we started with 717 sa DPWH. By the time natapos after the BICAM, it was increased by more or less 160, 170. So just as a caveat, when we do increase after the BICAM, can we make sure that hindi siya mas mataas sa total nung tatlo, nung TESDA, CHED, at saka DepEd? Because we don't want to have to question the BICAM or not vote for it or question sa Supreme Court. No? So just as a caveat, mahirap na mag-warning pag tapos na. So ngayon pa lang, because of flooding, I guess a lot of people will be lobbying for more flood control. Because of traffic, a lot more people will be lobbying for more roads. Because sa agriculture sector, we really need irrigation and farm-to-market roads. And the Senior Deputy Executive Secretary, the head of the H2O office, told us nga na maraming infra na kailangan, no? So just that caveat lang. So next slide. Quickly lang po. Having the biggest allocation doesn't mean that they have enough. I know I'm preaching to the choir. Many of you, the NEDA Secretary, in talking about inequality in income distribution, I've seen, or at least I've heard you or heard people talk about you about education. So I know nagkakaisa tayo dito, but I just want to show you a disturbing statistic, the next slide, and of course to thank Senator Win Gatchalian, who's heading the new EDCOM. So the first EDCOM was with Senator Ed Angara. This time around, si Senator Win Gatchalian, and just by his name, he's looking for a win-win situation. Pati girlfriend niya, manalo, kaya win-win talaga ang hinahanap niya. No? This disturbing statistics, just look at NCR, Secretary. 184 students ang one shift, but it's 6 hours and 30 minutes. Kami kasi noon 7 to 3 or 8 to 4 eh. So that was 8 hours. Ngayon 6.5 na lang. Yun ay kung walang shift. Yung 2 shifts is 5 hours and 10 minutes na lang. And kung titignan mo, 553 schools in Metro Manila are on a 2 shifts. Meron pang 3 shifts. 17 sila. So, if you look quickly lang, the 30-second history, time ni President Ferdinand Marcos, I think umabot tayo ng 18 or 20% ng gastos natin education. It was quite well, and I think we were second just to Japan, no? And then time ni President Cory, the new constitution demanded or assured people of free high school. But nagka-problema kasi walang pera. So, towards the end of the Cory administration, nalaman na nagmag-mass promotion. Nag-high school yung hindi marunong magbasa ng bata. Fast forward, President Erap did some reforms, President Arroyo did some reforms. Pagdating kay President Pinoy, finally, nahabol yung dami ng classroom. Ang problema, dinagdagan ng 3 grade level. Dinagdagan ng K, dinagdagan ng 11 and 12 na hindi na-sustain yung pera. It was still doing good, to be fair, when the economy was good in 2016, 2017, 2018. Pero nagka-pandemic, yung mga nasa private school, lumipat na sa public school kasi hirap na sila. So, right now, ang nakikita kong alarm bells pa lang is Region 4A, Region 7. Region 7, 1/4 na of the, di ba, 2,000 ang one shift, 539. So, I do not blame DepEd now for streamlining the curriculum, but if you look at a longer range, if you look at education the last 40 years, we went from going to free to building more classrooms to adding years, and then babawasan mo rin pala ng oras. And then yung promise ng K-12 na parang Don Bosco, na kung gusto mo maging electrician or electronics, meron sa school. Kung gusto mo maging dressmaker, kung gusto mong maging fashion designer, walang gamit yung mga school ng ganun eh. So I just want to leave it there. I'll take it up with the Department of Education, but I do know they have a cap. So I do know they will agree with me. So that's one thing, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to look up. Baka dapat taasan yung cap ng, kung tataasan din naman natin ang DPWH, taasan na rin naman natin DepEd, but this time around, lupa, kasi sa Metro Manila, kaya
Sorry, Your Honor, what cap is that? What cap?
People kasi, di ba, pagka ang kausap na natin yung mga department, sasabihin lang, sir, gusto naman namin pero kinat ng DBM. So people don't understand that actually, wala naman choice ang DBM kasi kung 5 trillion yung budget, hindi pwedeng lumampas doon. So ang gagawin ng DBM, correct me if I'm right anytime, Mina, but this was my experience sa DFA, magbibigay kami ng Tier 1 at Tier 2. Yung Tier 1, yung pinaka-essential, then Tier 2, yung parang wish list namin. So kung yung Tier 1, let's say, ng DFA is 10 billion, ang Tier 2, usually they gave 5 billion. Nung time ko, sabihin ko, wish lang naman yan, lakihan nyo na. Lagyan nyo na ng 20 billion, halimbawa. So usually yan, mapapasa yung Tier 1 mo, pero yung Tier 2 mo, hindi lahat. So ang point ko, Mr. Chairman, so kung ngayon ang DepEd is 758, kahit anong sabihin natin kay Vice President Sara at sa kay Yusek Powa, etc., limited sila sa 758. But if we say, you know what, you need classrooms, you need to buy land, etc., we'll give you another 100 billion, then tataas yung initial cap na binigay ng DBM. So wala tayong cap sa Senate.
But, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
With your permission, Sen. Alan.
Yes, go ahead.
Sen. Mina, may fund ba tayo? Kasi the problem, ni-raise na niya yung sa vocational. Hindi hinahire yung K-12 graduates because there's no certificate or accreditation or certification of the graduates. Unlike when they go to TESDA, may sinacertify sila. So, industry knows whether to hire them or not because they base it on that certification. Dito since we've had the K-12 for 10 years, there is no funding for certification since then. So, all those graduates, we gave them that false promise na mahahire sila. They will find work. But the truth is, they will not unless they have that certification. So, my question is that certification provided in the 2024 budget? Did anyone know? If not, I'll just ask it during the DepEd budget and maybe the Senate can do something about it. Alam ni EDCOM Chair Winto na yan talagang one of the crucial low-hanging fruit pagdating sa K-12.
Chairman, while they're looking for it,
My apologies for raising that issue. I know you were...
No.
Not to break your momentum,
I'm
Your Honor.
super happy that you brought that up kasi nga, I was one of the 2 senators who was against K-12. But Senator Angara patiently sat me down, talked about it patiently, pero alam mo naman mga tatay natin.
Wore you down, wore you down.
Wore me down, pero alam mo naman mga tatay natin, may kasama ng, pasanan natin yan. Diba? So, anyway, ang promise nun, the TESDA certification will be passed to them. And even TESDA teachers can be used by DepEd. So for example, no, if we have a high school, pupunuan namin ng gamit for electrical, kung ano yung sa TESDA na MC2 na electrical, ganun din sa high school namin. Siyempre, you won't offer anything. The high school has to choose. So for example, if my high school has cars, I can put a driving school and I can offer that. Diba? Or if my high school has a lot of computers, we can offer coding. And yung time ni TESDA man, Senator Majority Leader Joel, ino-offer na yon yung MC2. Nangyari ngayon, baliktad, dinagdagan natin ng dinagdagan yung TESDA. Tapos pag out of school ka, doon ka pumunta, rather than ang TESDA, pumasok sa mga high school and supervise yung technical part of the K to 12 track. So instead of joining the two, although different supervision, di ba sa ano ngayon sa Singapore and sa ibang countries, you have yung collab na, Mr. Chairman, yung Harvard and NUS or yung ganon, di ba? So the ideal really is that TESDA actually coordinate with the DepEd on the technical part and then they accredit, di ba? So but let me just input that and then pass it to you, Mr. Chairman, pagdating sa TESDA at saka sa education. But that was the promise, no? And somehow hindi natupad. Kasi DepEd doesn't have the money to buy that equipment, eh. But TESDA does have that money.
Mr. Chair, with regard to your question po, dun sa mga major programs that DepEd provided us, hindi po namin makikita yung
That's crucial.
yung
That
Wala po siya.
funding will make a difference to a lot of people.
Inside
Oh.
a big
It's
program.
literally the difference between getting a job and not getting a job, Secretary.
Hindi po.
So let's if we could prioritize that, the Senate will try to add to it, but baka hindi masama lahat. I don't know. Mas kabisado ni Sen Winto will discuss it in detail. Yeah,
Quick,
go ahead.
quick
Yeah.
interjection lang, Mr. Chair. We estimated it will only cost about 1.4 billion pesos to certify about 400,000 TVL students. No? So that's not so much. But the difference there nga is
Is getting a job or not getting a job, di ba? So sayang yung 2 years na inaral nila.
But
So thank you, Your Honor.
But to that point, Mr. Chairman, I don't have the slide, but every year, mahigit 1 billion ang dinadagdag natin sa TESDA. So maybe this year, ilipat natin yung 1 billion pang certification nun. Kasi,
Fairness also to Senator Cayetano, who's chaired the subcommittee on education. She always puts it in her
Yeah.
wish list. Pero siguro it must be bumped up on the wish list kasi talagang for many people, it's the chance to earn a livelihood or not.
or keep the money with TESDA, let them accredit. Di ba? Pwede naman,
Your Honor, nahihirapan nga sila gastusin.
Yeah.
You see at the end of their year, pag alam nilang magre-revert nila, kung saan-saan na lang sila magbibigay ng scholarship.
Yeah.
Maybe for more efficient spending, we could divert that.
well, just so that marinig ng ating economic managers, na in love kasi yung TESDA from school vouchers eh. So kung sino man school, bibigyan voucher, mag-aral ka doon. Rather than eto, nasa DepEd na, nandyan na yung mga estudyante, turuan nyo, tapos i-certify nyo. Di ba?
Senator Alan, Senator Villar, I think, wants to make a point with your permission. Yeah.
Yes, I will
Senator
submit
Villar?
to the Villars.
I cannot understand why TESDA will underspend. Ang dami-daming nagko-complain na farm school na hindi nila binibigyan ng budget. Diba? Supposed to be TESDA will pay for the tuition of all the farmers studying in the farm school. Ang daming nagko-complain na farm school na hindi nila binabayaran. So you have to check that. Kasi yun talaga, when we created the farm school, I gave a lot of money to TESDA to pay for the tuition of the farmers studying in the farm.
Kulang sa sipag at tiyaga, Your Honor. Madam. Go ahead, Senator Alan.
Yeah, iklian ko na lang to, just one question on each of this, no? Ma'am, hindi ko na itanong ngayon, but access to capital, kasi napakalaki nung 5-6 sa ating bansa, napakaraming magandang programa. I know, for example, that DSWD has an SLP, di ba meron tayong agency na small loans. Can your staff na lang at a future date just give me the total? Kasi last year, binigay nyo naman yung total nung ayuda. Di ba? So, and I'm taking this from the point of Secretary Jokno that there are better ways of helping our people be productive than just giving away money, no? So I'd like to look at that, yung mga startups, etc., di ba? Kung how much yung total. You don't have to answer now, total. So to my next point, yung ayuda, last year, the chairman said that we have around 203 billion if you put all the ayuda together. And so Secretary Jokno and Secretary Mina are nodding, no? Correct, no? Something like that. Yes. And I asked, since it will fit to give all families of Filipinos 10,000, why don't we cut through the red tape, give it to the LGU, may listahan, and give it? Correct me if I'm wrong. And basically, no, to rephrase, ang answer ng economic team is that they'd rather do it targeted. So kung may sakit sa MAIP, PhilHealth, kung nasunugan through AIX, etc., for many reasons, but you'd rather do it that way, no? Correct me or change my answer. Basically, yun ang pagka-indenti ko last year. Tama po ba, Sec? Yeah. So Secretary Jokno is nodding, no?
Tama po, sir. Dapat targeted po.
Yeah. So there's no use in wasting time, as you taught me in economics, di ba? Wag sayangin yung time kasi resource din yon. So if I ask the same question this year, you'll give me the same answer, sir? So if I also ask na, why don't we get all the ayuda now and just give it to each and every family? Kasi yun ang advocacy ko to you know, to get them to get to start again, and then cut out the red tape, hindi na sila mag-a-apply sa DOH, hindi na sila mag-apply sa DSWD, etc.
Targeted po, and we are cleaning up the list also because there are some who do not deserve to be there but are getting benefits, and there are those deserving who are not in the list. Okay.
Thank you for that, and I'll agree to disagree. And the truth is naman, Secretary, nag-a-add, di ba? So like Secretary Rex Gatchalian is testing the food stamps, and then the Department of Agriculture is testing the kadiwa to lower the prices. So as we discuss this, there are innovations being made naman. No? Okay. Next slide, please. Can I move to the favorite topic the last few years of the LGU, no? The Mandanas ruling? Sir Chairman, has this been discussed since yesterday? Wala pa. Usually kasi ang dami.
Yun, Your Honor.
Mandanas ruling?
No, it has not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this chart is just a chart of actual tax revenue versus actual IRA versus NTA. Ang RIA, di ba, Local Government Code kay Senator Nene Pimentel. Ngayon na panahon na ni Coco, nata de Coco. NTA na nung panahon ni Senator Coco, no? So nagbago na. Okay. And the reason for this is the Supreme Court ruling sa Mandanas ruling. So next slide. Yeah. Ang question ko po, did we immediately, when did we start implementing the Mandanas?
Anybody can answer from the economic?
More or less lang po. And to be fair to the economic team, nakapending pa yung MR nun. They were already, I saw Sec Sani and Sec Jokno already discussing different possibilities, and I think they even entertained Governor Mandanas and other people to give suggestions. No?
An executive order, di ba, Sec?
Yes.
Issued during the Duterte administration.
Mr. Chair, the Mandanas Garcia ruling was implemented. It started in fiscal year 2022 budget cycle, Mr. Chair.
So it's implemented right away, no?
Apo.
Because that's the Supreme Court.
Yes po. During the time, the President issued an executive order on how to go and on how to implement po the ruling of the Supreme Court.
And under the constitutional system we have, when the Supreme Court interprets the law, the executive follows the law, di ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
How about the next slide? Sa Palawan po, di ba? Palawan used to get part of the Malampaya, but then nagkaroon po ng decision that declares that under existing law, the province of Palawan is not entitled to the share of Camagao Malampaya natural gas, no? And then they discussed why not. So as soon as this decision was made, did the government still give them their share or hindi na kaagad? I think obvious naman yung sagot, di ba? They stopped giving their share kasi yun ang utos ng Supreme Court, di ba? Again, we followed the Supreme Court, di ba? In these two cases, Did they have to file a writ of execution against the government to follow? May writ of execution ba si Mandanas para sundin nyo yung Mandanas ruling o sinundin nyo na lang?
Answer. Si Charlie.
Sir Janet Abel.
Attorney Janet Abuel po, Yusek Janet, hindi po ako abogado.
Bartap Natcher. You say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We received a record or a notice of finality of judgment, Mr. Chair.
So, pahirap ng pahirap to ay mahirap na mag-argue sa chief of police, sa ekonomista, tapos ngayon sa bar top notcher na na who I admire, no? Who I could not forget was interviewed sa TV. Ma'am, how does it feel to be a bar topper from the probinsya? And she very eloquently answered, "Excuse me, Baguio is a city." Tama ba, ma'am? Tama? Oh. Hindi kailangan ng Supreme Court decision yan. Okay. So, entry of judgment. Okay, I'll go back to that. May I ask the representative of the BIR some question lang po? Ma'am, good morning po. Okay. Yes. Can you put the next slide? Ma'am, I got this from the internet. More or less, tingin ko tama naman. These are the 5...
Your permission, Senal, I just want to acknowledge the presence of our Senate President, Senate President Zubiri. Morning, sir.
Chairman, with his presence, I will wrap up. So, ito po yung 5 cities. So, syempre, ma'am, pag nagko-kolekta ng tax, di ba, napaka-importante na yung top revenue, naaalagaan in the sense that you don't want it disrupted kung hindi yung targets nyo maapektuhan. Correct, ma'am?
Yes po,
Yes.
Your Honor.
Okay. So let me go to the next slide. Okay. Ito po ang dispositive part ng decision ng Supreme Court sa case of Taguig versus Makati, Makati versus Taguig. Take a look at number 2. The writ of preliminary injunction dated August 2, 1994, issued by the RTC of Pasig, explicitly referring to parcels 3 and 4, PSU 2031, comprising of Fort Bonifacio, be made permanent insofar as it enjoined the municipality, now City of Makati, from exercising jurisdiction over making improvements or otherwise treating as part of the territory parcels 3 and 4, PSU 2030, comprising Bonifacio. Okay. What's my point here? Next slide. Department of Education has already ordered the transfer of management and supervision of schools from Makati to Taguig. No need of writ of execution. The lawyers here will explain to you. Ang writ of execution, kung halimbawa, one slide back, ordering Makati to pay the cost. One slide back, please. Sorry, yung staff ko, alam mo lang forward, hindi marunong umatras tong mga to. Ayan, ordering the City of Makati to pay. Pag pumunta kami doon at ayaw nilang magbayad, we cannot steal their property. We have to get a writ and then identify their bank and then tell the bank, the writ is an utos, ito yung cost, bayaran mo. Diba? Kasama yung sheriff. Pero yung number 2 na exercise jurisdiction, no one has to tell Taguig to exercise jurisdiction and no one has to tell Makati to stop exercising jurisdiction because it is a preliminary injunction made permanent. So any government agency that is giving the funds for the EMBO barangays right now to Makati is violating the Supreme Court. I will follow Ma'am Janet. We will give them the copy of the entry of judgment. So I will also request the BIR to instruct the BIR Makati to turn over to BIR Taguig that area. No, in fulfillment of the Supreme Court decision, ma'am.
Yes, Senator.
Yeah. And may I have a copy of that memo once you have discussed it with the proper authorities. Hindi naman kayo, ma'am, pag pinag-usapan ng komisyon.
po sa ano naman po sa Mancom po namin mapag-usapan. Actually po hindi naman po on our part po computerized po ang BIR. So it's more of
So it's
computer.
very simple,
It's more
yeah.
simple lang po
Oh.
sa gagawin.
Pero para ma'am yung taxpayer hindi mahirapan.
Opo, tama po.
Di ba? Kung saan sila pupunta.
Opo,
Oo.
tama po.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize kasi I was going to ask the BIR if they read the decision. Because yesterday, iba yung representative nila. Nagulat po ako nung nakita ko yung representative because husband po niya yung sumulat ng decision. So obviously, alam niya yung decision. Because like anyone katulad natin dito, katulad ni Sec Joc, no? Ako, awayin na kami ng buong mundo, wag lang ng asawa namin. No, what is my point here? My point here, Madam Secretary, no, alam mo, pag hindi ko lang kinamayan si Sec Joc, no, tinatanong ng wife ko, nakita pa kayo, nakita kayo Senate, oo. Nilapitan mo ba? Nilapitan mo. Love, nasa likod nasa harap ako Lapitan mo, kamayan mo, kaibigan ko asawa niya, tapos hindi mo kakamustahin. Diba? So, yung mga may asawa, nagkakaintindihan tayo. I'm saying this for the benefit of you, Sec Mina. Pag hindi ko to tinapos tong question na to, patay ako pag uwi ko mamaya. Okay? So I just want to finish that. Can I get a commitment from the DBM that they will execute the right memos for the following items? Number one, that all departments, yung funds for the MBOS, whether it's DOH, DepEd, etc., will now, in the 2024 budget, be under the jurisdiction of that department dealing with Taguig. So for example ngayon, yung MOOE, the 2023, nandun pa sa District of Makati. Nilipat na sa District of Taguig. Pero kung hindi nila kayang ibigay this year, okay lang, City of Taguig na sasagot, di ba? But we want the memo. Secondly po, if you look at, next slide please. Next slide.
With your permission, just want to acknowledge the presence of our Senate President Pro Temp, Senator Lauren Legarda, also the former chair of this committee.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'll wrap it up. 90 seconds.
Thank you very much.
Just 2 slides. So ito po, nakita natin po sa memo ng DepEd, they issued the jurisdiction because yun ang sinabi ng Supreme Court, but yung items ng teachers ay nasa ilalim pa ng Makati. Why is this important? Because I can tell you very bluntly, kaharap ko mismo yung mga teachers, tinatakot sila. Tinatakot sila that they're still under Makati. So, if we do not have that memo to assure them you are under so they're getting conflicting orders, even if very, very clear. I think Yusek Powa nagpatawag siya ng meeting mamaya, so I'm sure they'll clear it up, no? Next slide, please. Ma'am, one question pa ho. Next slide, please. So this is another slide, yung police po, NCRPO and the district director of SPD has already ordered na cases na doon will be filed with the Taguig City Prosecutor. So, Madam Secretary, ito lang po yung sinasabi ko na nasa sidebar natin yesterday, 2022 pa kasi yung decision naging final. So dapat yung era noong 2023, tinatanong ni Ma'am Janet, bakit hindi ka agad in-inform? And it's a fair question. Ma'am, I asked the City Hall bakit na hindi in-inform right away. Aside from judicial notice, no, it's because at the start of the year, we weren't exercising jurisdiction. So napaka-unfair naman na wala sa'yo DepEd, kukunin mo yung pondo. Wala sa'yo traffic, kukunin mo pondo. Pero ngayon, na itra-transfer na. So can you please study, it will not violate the 2023 budget because 2022, that the last quarter era will already be given dun sa gagastos, no? Last slide. Ito, ma'am, Commissioner po, ma'am, Makati was ordered by the Supreme Court to pay 1.2 billion plus interest. Nagbayad na po ba sila?
Actually, as of the moment po, titingnan ko po sa records namin, parang sa tingin ko, Ay, kung sagutin yan.
Sige lang, ma'am.
Muna sa office.
Kasi factual na lang.
Yeah,
But ito,
factual lang.
follow-up question ko. Kung magbayad sila voluntarily, tatanggapin nyo naman, di ba?
Kami po kasi sa BR, wala po kami tinatanggihan eh.
Yes.
Babayad.
No, tama po yun. Any revenue generating agency, pag magbabayad, tanggapin nyo. The point I wanted to make, Mr. Chairman, is very clear. Sa lahat ng Supreme Court decisions, voluntary compliance is always welcome. You do not always have to get a writ.
Yeah.
Kung ayaw po magbayad ng Makati, dalawa po ang remedy ng BIR. To file an anti-graft case doon sa mga opisyal na ayaw magbayad, and then number 2, to file a writ, tignan yung bangko o yung properties kunin. Pero kung magbabayad ng kusa, and ma'am, I'm not talking about Makati, but in general. So kayong mga hindi nagbabayad ng tax na nakikinig, pag inorderan kayo, you can do it voluntarily.
Opo.
Di ba? Na mas madali at mas maganda. So I'll end there. Just, next slide, please. I'll give you this list na lang, Madam Secretary. This is the total of the 2023 double appropriation. Next slide. May listahan naman ako. Unfortunately, ma'am, next slide. Unfortunately, ma'am, at saka hindi ko alam bakit parating 2 billion. For 2024, ang double appropriation for this year, for next year's budget,
2024.
2024 is also 2 billion.
Opo, yung
So, I don't know why it's always 2 billion, but I'll give you a copy. Sa akin lang kasi, I don't blame the DPWH last year kasi nga, June 30, nagbago ng budget, hinabol, bagong speaker, bagong Congress, di ba? But ngayon, we had 1 year na eh. No? And yung suggestion ko nga sa kanila, lagyan nilang phase 1, phase 2, ganyan. Pero hindi pa rin ginawa. Or may nakita pa kami, nilagay nung kilometer, pero yung double appropriation, same yung kilometer. Di ba? So anyway, let me leave it at that and thank you for your generosity. Yes, thank you very much. I will make it up to you in the other departments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you po.
Thank you very much for very important yung double, medyo importante yun para hindi masayang yung fiscal space, Secretary. Maybe we can implement some of the funds for digitalization and technology. Lagay natin dun sa software. Next is our Vice Chair, Senator Risa, unless the Senate President wishes to, he has the privilege, of course, to ask. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Senator
Thank you.
Angara, and thank you very much, Senator Risa. This was what I was going to ask yesterday, but unfortunately we had a guest from France. A French senator was with us, Senator Genet, who is a good friend of the Philippines when it comes to parliamentary issues in France. Yeah, just 3 policy questions, gentlemen and ladies. First of all, pleasant good morning, Mina, Sec Ben, Sec RC, and the rest of the economic team. And also our, I believe, nandito ba yung BSP natin, no? Wala na yung BSP natin. Oh, there he is. A representative, okay. 3 policy questions, Secretary. One is the Procurement Act amendments. Because Senator Angara, who will be very excited to make these amendments, chairing the Committee on Finance, of course, we're still at a loss on the Procurement Act amendments. Definitely, my interest on the Procurement Act is basically on the military side and Coast Guard. In recent developments, we need to procure the best and not necessarily the cheapest equipment. And in military spending, the cheapest is not the best because the cheapest will fall apart after 1 year. And we've seen that with the vehicles. Ano ba yung Mahindra? Bumili sila ng Mahindra after 1 year. Hindi na ginagamit ng police dahil nahuhulog yung mga pyesa ng Mahindra with due respect to the company. But it's a fact. So, and definitely I'm asking these questions, policy question on the Procurement Act so that we can help our military because I know there are several allies who would like to give us a slightly used, not necessarily brand new, but slightly used. When you buy aircraft, even a 10-year-old aircraft, as long as it's well maintained, can still be durable for the next 30 years. Same with ships, which are more affordable for us. Because if we buy brand new equipment, we can only buy 1 or 2 or 3 airplanes, for example, and yet that 3 airplanes could be one squadron of slightly used planes from allies. So that's one point I want to make, Your Honor. So maybe ask a question on, we ask an answer for my question on this Policy Issue and Procurement Act.
Mr. Senate President, yes, on the Procurement Act, we already have the amendments to the Government Procurement Act, and we are ready to present this to the President on Tuesday next week during our cabinet meeting. And after the approval of the President, we'll provide a copy of the bill to the Senate and the House for their further filing.
Fantastic. That's great news, just because we were at a loss on where to start from. So I'm glad that the Executive Department is providing us with the sample amendments. Thank you. And also, on the second policy question, you know, recent events that have happened in the West Philippine Sea have made us rethink our position on the economic front. And I believe that looking at Vietnam as our, not just a key ally and partner in the region, but as also a template for what is going on within the West Philippine Sea. Remember that Vietnam had more incidences of skirmishes with the Chinese, with our Chinese neighbors early on, even in the 90s and at the early 2000s. They've been able to make a policy shift, dislodging China as the #1 trading partner. They were able to lobby for free trade agreement from the European Union. They have a free trade agreement with the European Union. Tayo GSP plus lang. I'm happy that when we met together with Senator Gatchalian and Senator Lauren Legarda, that the President of the European Commission, President van der Leyen, has committed to help us with a free trade agreement as well with the European Union. That will be a great help so that we have other markets to tap for our products. But we should also look into free trade agreement with the United States. I think now the position that we're taking and the members of Congress that we have spoken to, I have spoken to several congressmen, both sides from the Democrats and from the Republicans, that they're open to having free trade agreements for certain countries, only with strategic allies. Kasi right now, we're pushing for the GSP Plus with the United States. But I think it's about 40 countries. It's a bill spanning 40 countries, and they're not very comfortable with giving all that GSP Plus or that priority or financial, I'd say, openness to their country with other countries. So, are we seeking that, Secretary Jokno? Because I know China is our #1 trading partner, but there will come a time that we do not want to be hostaged by a very aggressive neighbor in the north.
I think we
yes,
are
Secretary.
seeking FTA with the U.S., but I guess we have to wait until the presidential election is over. I don't think they are in a position to do that within the next few months.
Yeah, but I'm asking the policy question side. Are we trying to tap other markets? I mean,
Yes, we want
Yes.
an FTA with EU community, for example, and even the US.
yes, because for example, when I came out with my position on a ban on contracts, government contracts on Chinese government state-owned corporations, I used the context of what Vietnam had done. And people misconstrue that as saying I'm asking for a boycott on Chinese products. Obviously, if we boycott Chinese products, maybe half the equipment that we have here, together with half the things that we have on this table, will probably not be around. My point lang is, we have to have other markets to tap. India could be one. Japan and South Korea definitely could be one. And I'd like to ask a policy question to the NEDA. Are we actually looking for alternative markets for imports? Remember that there is a trade imbalance with China. We're only, I think it's 70-30. 70% the import here. We only, I think by the hundreds of billions of dollars, and we only export 30 plus. Yes, Secretary.
Mr. Chair, at the beginning of this administration, the President asked, how many bilateral and regional agreements do we have? And he was so surprised to find that we had very few. compared to the countries around us. And so we have not been aggressive in expanding access to trade with our neighbors. And so I think the primacy, I think, is to, and this what the president says, to speed up negotiations with many countries, not only US or EU, but even our neighbors, because there is so much limitation with the ASEAN, but if you can have these free trade agreements with many other countries, which is what Vietnam has been aggressively doing. That's why they are now the center of the world for investment, because they're very aggressive in opening up their places for investment, their country for investment. That's what I think should be our high priority, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sec. I'm happy for you to say that, because that has been the strategy of Vietnam, and you're absolutely correct. It's now the center of the world. Every time we talk to U.S. senators and congressmen, they've been saying we'd like to have a portion of the businesses leaving China to go to the Philippines rather than all Vietnam, because they're now having a strategic partnership, economic partnership with Vietnam. So I believe, and they had a long war with Vietnam, decimated half their population, including half the natural resources of that country. But now they're making amends, and I believe the United States also will be coming over to very soon with a trade mission to hopefully also ask the Philippines to look at the U.S. with renewed vigor, rather, and will push for that free trade agreements. But even sourcing materials. Why don't we focus on local? Tama po sinabi ni Senator Binay, katabi ko, why don't we focus local? Like, why are we buying fruits and vegetables from China when we can actually grow these fruits and vegetables here in the Philippines? Indonesia did that policy shift. Indonesia banned all the rare earth metals from export. That's why tumaas ang presyo ng nickel, tumaas ang presyo ng rare earth minerals. Because their focus of Widodo, and this was Widodo's policy, the focus of President Widodo is gawin dito sa Indonesia yung processing at yung hindi lamang po siyang byproduct or hindi lang po siya raw materials, pero high value products ang i-develop. So I spoke to investors because I'm trying to get as many investors as we can. As you know, we've been doing the rounds in the US and other countries to bring investments here. And they were saying in Indonesia, they're giving a plethora of financial incentives for these companies to actually build battery plants, rare earth metals processing facilities, all in Indonesia. So I'm hoping that we can follow suit, Secretary, because I think that's a policy that we should take. If you want an independent foreign policy, we have to have also an independent and strategic and strengthened economic policy so that we're not hostage by any other country. So, and I'm sure the Secretary will agree with me on that. Secretary,
Yes,
do we have the same mindset? Secretary.
We are thinking of the same thing, but I think before we ban, for example, the export of ore, we have to make sure that there are facilities available in the Philippines for developing for value added. Okay.
Well, just for the information of the body, I spoke to an investor that is they're actually in Korea now signing an MOU with Poksu, which is one of the biggest battery developers in Korea. And alam mo sinabi nila, ang sabi ng mga American businessmen, we would like to buy batteries directly from your company, but would you assemble them in the Philippines? I was completely taken by surprise there, pleasantly surprised, that was the mention, na they no longer put high level processing plants in the Philippines, Secretary. Just for your information. I just found out about 2 nights ago because they were leaving and they had no gifts to give. So I had to buy, I gave them yung giveaways namin dito para sa mga embassies para madala-dala nila yung regalo dun after the signing of the MOU. So just to let you know, pero binayaran ko ulit. I paid for it again. On the Chinese contractors, Your Honors, I know they go through NEDA approval, Secretary RC. It makes no sense, no? And I came out with this publicly the other day, both in show of Karen Davila and then kay Noli De Castro in his radio program. Sabi ko, it makes no sense for us to give billions of pesos to a Chinese contractor, state-owned, who will bring the profits back to China, and that profit, because it's state-owned, will go back to fund their different activities in the West Philippine Sea. Parang linuluto natin ang ating sarili sa sariling mantika. Ika nga. Do we still have several Chinese contractors, state-owned contractors doing contracts for us here being paid by Filipino taxpayers' money, including those of the Coast Guard and Navy na kinakaltasan na kanilang sweldo ng buwis na binabayaran nila taon-taon. So, may we have an answer on that?
Okay, in case decision is made to ban Chinese contractors from participating in pipeline projects of the national government, it may have the following potential effects, right? For example, implementation of official development assistance projects from bilateral and multilateral ODA partners alike, particularly for projects considering multiple country participation, including China, as a member of the Asian Development Bank, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and the World Bank. So that it might affect the implementation of those projects.
Pero
Procurement, let me finish, Your Honor. Procurement of locally funded projects and even PPP implementation, if the main contractors, suppliers, or subcontractors will be Chinese firms or Chinese nationals. Potential impact on the economy for possible delays in the projects that will be affected. And of course, we have to shift to the financing for those projects that have been requested from China. Let me give you the situation. Because of the huge list or the long list of infrastructure projects that we want to do, we're running out of workers in the Philippines, Your Honor. I think you will agree with me. We're running out of work, plus also the private sector workers. And we need foreign workers, maybe Indian workers, Chinese workers, etc.
Yeah, but Secretary, I mean, I think we all have to stand up for what's happening in the West Philippine Sea.
Yeah.
You have to make a policy decision.
Especially, Your Honor, with
Secretary,
renewables, renewable energy, and power projects.
Sec, allow me to finish as well. Okay, yeah. We have to also stand up for our troops in the West Philippine Sea. We should not be allowed, they should not be allowed to be bullied. I think we all agree to that.
I agree.
Yes. So, again, babalik ko yung statement na bakit natin gigisayin ang ating sarili sa ating sariling mantika. Masyado tayong bilib sa China. I mean, we can always get South Korean contractors. We can always get Japanese contractors. We can get Vietnamese contractors. They make fantastic infrastructure. We can get Indian also supplies from India. Secretary, kausap ko si Secretary Bautista. Ang sabi niya sa akin, ang palpak lahat ng Chinese contracts. Hindi na tuloy. South Rail. They abandoned it. All these contracts that were made in the previous administration are abandoned. Correct? You're nodding your head, yes. So it's
Mr. Chair, SP, if I may just interject to support the line of argument of
With the
SP.
permission of the Senate President.
Thank you, SP. And thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at an Asia Times article citing NEDA statistics na as a percentage of total ODA received by the Philippines as of June 2018, China accounted for a mere 0.8% of the estimated $13 billion received. NEDA statistics po ito, Mr. Chair, SP. While, for example, Japan, on the other hand, accounted for 40.3% of the total. And in that list po, China also trailed Australia, South Korea, the European Union, and France in total ODA given. 6 lang po siya, NEDA statistics,
yeah,
SP, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, my distinguished distinguished colleague. And that's my point, Mr. Secretary. Masyado tayong believe sa China kung yung talagang dumarating dito galing China ay napakaliit.
Your Honor, that the statistics are correct. There are only a few Chinese projects. Okay, most of the projects done during the Duterte administration are financed by ADB or JICA. However, as I mentioned, when it's ADB project, any member country can actually compete in the bid out, okay, in the bidding of the project. And if it requires a Chinese contractor, if the Chinese contractor wins, we cannot do anything about that.
Usually the style is, di ba, pag kumuha tayo ng COICA to do the feasibility study.
Yeah.
Diba?
Kung ano po, yung
COICA, Korean government yun.
Yes,
correct. JICA, I hope that the bridge that you will develop to Cavite and Bataan will be from a reputable country such as Japan or South
Could be
Korea.
a Japanese firm, but the workers do not have to be Japanese kasi wala na hong workers from Japan eh. Wala na ring mga South Korean na...
I absolutely agree.
So, kaya hindi ho natin kontrolado yung who's going to do the project.
I don't disagree with you on the workers, and that's my next issue. Actually, that's my last policy statement on the workers. I have no problem on your point, but we have other options. We're not saying we don't have to make it. It can be a policy shift when it comes to that, because the track record shows palpak ang mga projects ng China dito sa ating bansa. They were supposed to do the Clark. What happened to them? Gone with the wind. They were supposed to do the rail on the way to Bicol. Gone with the wind. They were supposed to do the Mindanao Rail. Ang ganda-ganda. Gone with the wind. It's now in the West Philippine Sea. So, my point is, let us deal with, I think, reputable and reliable, friendly partners with like-minded ideals. And I think that would be a better option for our country. Kasi kung hindi nakataya palagi tayo, kung let's say nagkagulo na sa West Philippine Sea, Secretary. You know, we have several Chinese nationals in this country, to be honest with you. When I go jogging at night, I see several young men from mainland China with short hair jogging around my village. You know, I'm worried that we might, wala si Senator Bato dito, pero I'm worried baka pinasukan na tayo dito sa Pilipinas. Ngayon sa Ross Boulevard, nandyan na sila. They're what you call at your doorstep. There was a movie, Lions at the Gate. So, ang punto ko dyan, what is the policy of ours for protecting our sovereignty in this country? Maybe we need to make a nationalist stand on how we can look at other options for our country. Because as the records show, palpak din naman yung kontrata nila. They never followed through with it. And I think that on the future projects, you want to do the bridges connecting Region 6, you want to do the Cavite-Bataan Bridge. Why don't we look at Japan? Why don't we look at South Korea on that aspect? Moving on to my third policy question. You mentioned it correctly. Wala na tayong workers. Bakit po, Secretary, wala na po tayong workers? Because I'll tell you, most of our workers, especially skilled workers, are abroad. It's very true. They are abroad. Most of your best welders and electricians and all are in Saudi Arabia, the Middle East. They're all working abroad. And why, Your Honors? Because, to be honest, they don't feel that they can survive with the salaries that we have here in the Philippines. I know you came out already publicly stating that you guys are against legislative wage hikes, but I'll be honest with you, Secretary, kawawang-kawawa po ang ating mga kababayan. Yung self-rated poverty in and out every year in, year out in our country is always over 50%. Kalahati po ng ating kababayan, nararamdaman po nilang kahirapan. How can you survive with then 570 pesos a day salary, and now plus 40 is 610? Tumaas po, naghihingi po ng rate hike ang ating mga public utility vehicles. Tapos tumaas ang presyo ng kuryente, tumaas ang presyo ng gasolina. Ang bigas po ay averaging 40 to 50 pesos. And I know that. You can ask the speaker. The speaker went to the palengke. I'm sure the speaker saw the prices of bigas per kilo. Tapos, yung masama pa, yung 40 pesos rate hike, Metro Manila pa lang. Metro Manila lang. Sa amin ni Mina, sa Mindanao, it has not moved. You know what the daily wage earner in her province earns? 340 pesos. OMG. What can you buy with 340 pesos for a family of 5? The rice cost is the same. The energy cost is even more expensive in Lanao del Sur. The water maybe is free because nag-iimbak na lang sa likod. Pero lahat po, yung Jollibee, McDonald's, pareho yung presyo nila doon kaysa dito. Pareho. So my point is, I think we also need to look into a possibility that we increase the wages of our people a bit. And just to show you, Mr. Secretary, before they would harp that we are the second highest minimum wage in the region. Well, statistics now, today, have shown that Indonesia increased their minimum wage to about 842 pesos a day. Malaysia is now 854 pesos a day. Singapore is 2,486 pesos a day. Kaya ang daming Singaporean, ang daming Filipinos sa Singapore. Almost all their H&R, yung hotel and restaurant, are Filipinos. It is only, we are at par now with Vietnam, but I'd like you to know that when I spoke to our Vietnam counterparts, they are also thinking of increasing the minimum wage in Vietnam. So ano po ang punto ko dito, Mr. Secretary? Let me give you the figures that I saw in the news. This was only in the news the last 2 days. Our friends, JG Summit, net income sourced by 9.5 billion first half of 2023. Ayala Corporation net income up by 55%. PAL earns 13.6 billion record net income. Megaworld net income surges 71% in first half of 2023. Al Jazeera also shows news reports that Philippine economy grows fastest pace in 40 years. Pero ang ating mga workers, Mr. Secretary, are in the rut. They are in the rut. Can we give them a bit of a fighting chance? Na, I truly believe if you put in the effort to help our workers, we will have more productivity and maybe we can entice more of them to come home. Yun na po. And I hope that you can agree that maybe we can find a number which is acceptable. Because I've spoken to Frederick Go. I've spoken to Megaworld, Kevin Tan. I've spoken to a lot of the Taipans. And they've said, kaya nila. Pwede. Pwede. And even the MSMEs, I know you're saying that mahirapan ang MSMEs. I think, let's say, for example, a 100 peso additional minimum daily wage will be a welcome respite from them and not enough to break their banks, Secretary. I hope that you can sympathize with us, and I think the Senate, I have sympathy from the senators on this. Secretary, would you like to give an opinion?
All right. First of all, let me just state that the Bataan-Cavite Interlink Bridge is going to be financed by ADB, Asian Development Bank, and the AIIB. Okay. Now, on the position, the position of the proposed 150 wage hike, Your Honor, one of our major concern right now is inflation. Okay, inflation. The Monetary Board has before we have a policy meeting tomorrow, and so I remember that our assumption for the wage increase is 24 pesos this year, and then 25 pesos next year. Okay, and that will be consistent with our target of 2 to 4% inflation rate. Now, with the 40 peso recently passed wage increase, then we are going to make the adjustment. Okay, so Metro Manila, but that will be this will be for the whole country, yung minimum wage increase. Now, the proposed 150 peso increase could bring the country's inflation rate further away. Right now, baka 5.6% po yung average for the year, baka tumaas ulit yung inflation. And also, that kind of increase will have a second round effect, which would mean that wages could be passed on by businesses, industries, and other institutions to consumers. Yun lang po ang concern namin. No? So we might solve this wage problem, but mas mataas po yung impact na sa inflation.
Pero
mas marami pong maapektuhan na tao.
I understand. No? We all studied economics here that will also increase cost of goods. But Secretary, babalik din naman sa ekonomiya yan eh. Yeah. Babalik din kasi sa ekonomiya yun eh. Yeah. What we need to focus are high inflation rates on, for example, our energy sector. We're the most expensive. Diyan tayo nagkakaisa. Isa po tayo sa pinakamahal. Kaya lahat ng investors na ine-entice ko pupunta dito, unang-unang tanong nila, lalo ng mga Hapon, ba't ang mahal ng kuryente nyo mas mura sa Thailand? Ba't ang mahal ng kuryente mo mas mura sa Vietnam? Yan ang kailangan na natin pababain. Food cost and electricity cost. Di ba po? Cost of living. Now, on the increase in wages, I feel that it will go back to the people. It will just go back to the economy. Because now they have a chance to be able to bring their kids to Jollibee, they have a chance to bring their kids to the malls and buy a little something for them. So, lalago yung ekonomiya eh. Ako kasi, I'm in the I'd say, train of thought that dapat talaga suportahan natin yung ekonomiya para lalo lumakas ang ekonomiya by giving them a chance to be able to spend. It's for more spending. It's spending opportunities by our people. So, I agree with you, Sec. It may increase inflation, but on the long run, if we bring down electricity costs, if we bring down, let's say, other costs on manufacturing, I think we can temper it. We can manage it. Yes, Sec. RC.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may also respond. Yesterday, we presented data showing us that unemployment rate is comparatively low already in the Philippines, but the problem is really the quality of jobs. I emphasize that the lack of quality jobs and nothing less than increasing investments, particularly in strategic areas like manufacturing, could improve that quality of jobs, and with the quality of jobs, then earnings of workers would be much higher. Now, Mr. Chair, obviously we understand what the problems are: high cost of energy, poor infrastructure, high cost of doing business, and the PDP, the plan is we are trying to address those. But what I'm trying to say, Mr. Chair, that if we don't address if we address the problem of low incomes now by raising the wages, by legislative fiat, and these other factors that are required by investors to come in will come much later. What will happen is this, and these are real data. These are based on the economy-wide information that we have. Is this: suppose you increased wages by 150 pesos, the GDP will slow down in the first semester, but our GDP will contract by 0.2 to 0.9%, and then the unemployment rate would also increase from 0.3 to 1%. The inflation has already been mentioned, that will increase, and worse, the number of unemployed will actually increase. Yeah, that's the
gist of it.
Yeah,
but Secretary, my final point, because I'm running out of time, my final point there is that the lack of quality jobs is also because of the lack of quality skilled workers that we have. They're all leaving. The diaspora that we're seeing now is because of the low wages. And I'm not talking about minimum wage. Dapat pati yung middle income, dapat dagdagan din sila. Yung nurses, ang problema natin sa nurses, it's simple, Mr. Secretary. The problem of nurses is they're getting offered jobs for high-paying jobs abroad. Ganun lang yun. We have hospitals in Bukidnon and in Mindanao, they're being paid 20,000 a month. Come on. So, they're really going to leave. And I'm only working with minimum wage here, but you have to see, even middle income, blue collar, white collar jobs, they also have to increase the rates. I just read to you the incomes of all these companies. We know them all. They're all our friends. They can afford it. My point being is, when we asked we had the Pulse Asia, I had a Pulse Asia rider question. Are you in favor or not in favor of the proposal to increase minimum wage by 150 pesos in the private sector nationwide? 97%, almost all. Obviously, everybody wants an increase in wages, right? Almost all. My point being is, kailangan talaga nila. They wouldn't answer this way if they felt that their salaries are okay, inflation is low, prices are cheap, they can afford it. But my point is, we have to give them a chance. With these rates now, if we continue, you will not find any workers, Secretary Jokno, Secretary Balisacan, for your projects. Because they will not come back to the Philippines. They are comfortably located abroad. You can ask Secretary Villanueva of TESDA, Secretary Joel, who used to be head of TESDA. Right now, TESDA, all the graduates of TESDA training centers are applying for passports and they're applying abroad. That's the long and short of it. We will not have jobs. And that's why our population of overseas workers are growing by the thousands every week. Yun ang aking punto dyan. I mean, you also have to look into the fact that there might come a time na wala tayong workers. Alam mo, maraming resorts sa Camiguin, sa Cagayan de Oro, walang ma-hire na waiters, chefs, and hotel managers. They're all abroad, particularly Singapore. So yun lang po. That's my point. I agree. It's a chicken or the egg scenario. Do we increase salaries to keep them, entice them here, or entice them to come home? Or do we keep our rates low and you will not get anything? We'll just have to do AI. That's the whole point. So, and then and I spoke to American companies, by the way, they were shocked and appalled that our rates were this low. They want to come in here, and I mentioned it to you, Secretary, I went to you to Malacanang because there was an eco zone that was telling them, wag mong bigyan ng malaking sweldo yung mga tao nyo kasi baka hindi kayo makakakuha ng incentives. And it was debunked by Secretary Jokno. That is not true. Pero my point is, there are companies that want to come here and give decent jobs to their employees. So yan ang dapat itap natin. Mostly Western nations, no? Western countries. So yun lamang po, that's my point. I know we differ on policy opinions on this issue, but I think we have to make a political stand if we have to make a political stand on this particular issue. And I think the President has a big heart. May puso yung Pangulo natin. If he understands that around the region they're increasing already their minimum wages, I think he'll understand that there might be the need to make these sacrifices for the people. And by the way, the 40 pesos, Secretary, is only NCR. That's why I'm so angry. What happened to the wage boards all over the country? Mindanao, wala pang increase. Nakakainis mga yan. Kaya nga, we want to do their job for them. So maraming salamat, Sec. Thank you, Sec Jokmos. Thanks, Sec RC, Sec Mina, and all the members of the committee.
Thank you very much, Senate President Zubiri, for very good points and caring for our workers. Senator Alan, yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I just wanted
By the way,
just a quick intervention
really
from
quick,
Senator Alan,
just
with your
a quick,
permission.
really quick.
Okay, before there's a rejoinder.
I just wanted to say the DBCC briefing, the DBM said 17 billion set aside for possible government workers' salary hike in 2024. It's lumped in the miscellaneous personal benefits fund. So I'm just wanting to put out that the government might get an increase in salary. Dapat sana sa private sector then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator Alan.
Not an intervention, Mr. Chairman. I just reviewed the minutes. I did not get an answer from the DBM because it was my fault. I shifted to another question. So may I just clarify?
Yeah, we'll get that
DBM.
answer from DBM. Go ahead.
The short question is yun nga na may I rely on you and your department to issue the proper communications, coordinations, to the other departments, and then of course yung ating letters, just so that it's clear that it's moving, kasi rather than us going to each and every department and explaining everything, we will use your coordination dahil yung budget nga sa DBCC talaga.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we will draft and issue maybe a circular letter to make it standardized. The same that was presented or issued by DepEd and PNP.
Thank you.
And my office will provide all the necessary documents. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Alan, Senator Sec Mina, for your response. Vice Chair and Deputy Minority Leader Senator Risa, thank you for waiting very patiently since yesterday. It's your turn. I just want to, for some administrative matters, I think our economic managers deserve a break in a few minutes. So maybe after Sen. Risa, with your permission, Senator JV and Senator Win, if we could break for lunch for half an hour, is that okay? Okay, yeah. So after Senator Risa, yeah. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So quickly, just to follow yung earlier train of questioning ni S.
Sorry again for
Mr. Chair.
interruption, because the Senate President just informed me that he's extending the session to 4 o'clock so we can finish, so you don't have to come back for another day. I think that's acceptable to all of us. Yeah. Thank you, Senate President. Thank you, Senator Risa.
Thank you also, Mr. Chair. So yun na nga po, pagsunod lang dun sa train of questioning ni SP kanina, for example, in the South Rail, we don't even need to go and borrow from China, ni sa ADB, kung yung PPP option lang, no, na sinosponsor ngayong bill ni Sen. JB, if the PPP option can be supported. So just that additional point, Mr. Chair, on the earlier line of questioning. Tapos po, with siyempre pagbati ng magandang tanghali sa mga kasamang senador, sa ating mga secretaries, and the whole DBCC family. Kahapon po, yung unang araw ng DBCC briefing, hindi nababahala yung economic manager sa utang. Pataas na daw ng pataas yung ating credit rating at magiging madali at mura ang pangungutang sa ibang bansa. Pero sa totoo din lang, nasayang yung isang taon. And maitatanong, halimbawa, anong hakbang ang mga nagawa, halimbawa ni na SOF, para umusad yung mga tax measures na hinihingi sa kanila ni Presidente? Maitatanong din, saan kaya nila kukunin ang pambayad sa ating uutangin? So, Mr. Chair, colleagues, yung mga tanong ko will most probably revolve around two themes, no? Una, na yung, at nabanggit ko na rin po kahapon, na yung bansa natin, and actually yung buong mundo, patuloy na nasa crisis mode. At patuloy na humaharap sa mga bago pang mga hamon. At yung budget, as it's being expended now, 2023, and even as it is proposed for 2024, hindi siya fit sa layunin na to. And pangalawang tema, ang gobyerno actually sa tingin ko po is at risk na living beyond its means. At risk pa nga ng revenge debt accumulation sa 2024. Yung mga spending programs ay na-program sa mga revenues na in-interpellate din ni Sen. Coco kahapon. Yung mga spending programs ay program sa mga revenues na maaring dumating na too little, too late. Okay, so unang tanong, no, diretso na sa inflation, sa rising prices, na kumpara sa mga nakaraang taon na halos hindi naman bukang bibig nating, well, at least na mga mamamayang Pilipino, yung inflation, kahit sa mga surveys ngayon, lumalabas na top of mind talaga. So inflation nga nitong first semester ay sinasight ng ating economic managers para sa kamakailan lang, particularly second quarter, na slowdown sa GDP growth. Pero itong inflation muli is rearing its ugly head. Yung presyo ng bigas ay tumataas dahil mahal ang imports. Nasalanta pa tayo ng bagyo, baha. Ayaw daw ibenta ng mga Thai at Vietnamese exporters ang bigas na mas mababa naman, sa mas mababang presyo na kinontrata sa kanila ng mga importers natin. Tapos may El Nino pang inaasahan. At tumataas din ang presyo ng langis. No? Dalawa po itong binanggit ko kahapon. Tumataas din ang presyo ng ibang pagkain dahil hindi na naman pinapadaan ng Russia yung wheat at iba pang pagkain na galing sa Ukraine. Ang Bangko Sentral naman, sa ilalim ng dating Gobernador Medalla, ay nag-recommend noon ng tinatawag nilang non-monetary na GOCCs at line agencies ang gagawa dahil hindi na dapat tinataasan pa masyado ang interest rates bilang pangkontra sa pagtaas ng mga presyo. At maitatanong din, no, ilang porsyento na ba ang itinaas? So unang tanong ko ngayong tanghali, Mr. Chair, magkakaroon po ba muli ng mga non-monetary measures? Ito po, binanggit din ni Gov. Remolona kahapon. Non-monetary measures upang pababain ang mga preso. Ito ba'y reflected sa revenue program? Ito ba'y reflected sa budget? Non-monetary measures, halimbawa, itataas ba ang importation ng corn para sa feeds? Magkakaroon ba ng fuel subsidies? Binanggit din ni Sec Mina ang fuel subsidies kahapon. Bababaan ba uli ang taripa sa pork imports? Aalisin ba ang tax sa uling na gamit pa rin ng ating power plant? So yun po yung unang tanong ko. Magkakaroon po ba ng ganitong non-monetary measures reflected ba sa revenue program at sa budget mismo, Mr. Chair?
Let me provide Mr. Chair, the broader picture, and the specific budget-related measures can be provided by SecMina. I think that we do recognize the critical importance of inflation in achieving our all the development goals, particularly sa poverty and food security. Insofar as the what non-monetary measures we deploy, I think the bigger picture is we must appropriately deploy trade policy. As I said earlier, if you have shortages, and not only small shortages but big shortages, you must be able to access supplies from other sources, from abroad, if that is that would mean that we don't have nationally, we don't have enough. And I think that a big in the early part of the COVID, initially the main source of inflation was imported, okay, because of the supply disruptions globally. But eventually it became also increasingly domestic, and that was partly because of our then lack of appreciation of what we have there, lack of information or inadequate information about our local situation, the supply, the demand, the production, the volume, the inventory, and we don't have those available immediately and shared across stakeholders so that stakeholders could take appropriate action. As a result, napatagal yung shortages and that led to increases in commodity prices, at least for some of the commodity prices. Kaya napaka-importante yung trade policy, and importante yung data yun is shared and regularly collected para we are properly informed of the local situations. So again, looking at the longer term, not just for this year, Mr. Chair, but for the rest of this medium-term plan that we have, our priority, our thrust is to improve productivity. And in the case of agriculture, as I said yesterday, nothing less than...
How can we improve productivity if we keep importing?
No, the importation should not be seen as a permanent solution.
But if you look, I think if you look over time, we've been in Congress quite some time, Sekarsi. You've been in the DA since the 90s with my father. Pero you've seen siguro as a percentage of spending, I think it's gone up over time. Would you agree?
Yeah. No, yes. Because what we have, if you look at our data closely, our productivity has barely moved. Because compared to our neighbors like Indonesia, Vietnam in particular, if you look at how well, China is particularly spectacular, raising from 2-3 metric tons to 10 tons per hectare. That's and they have done that in such a short period of time by proper
Sid, just like onions, I saw the figure. Every year, it's 27,000 metric tons ang shortage. But the importation is 100,000. Di tatama rin na yung mga onion farmer to produce because ang laki na importation.
Sending
Why
the wrong
don't you
signals.
review
We're sending the wrong signals.
Yung PSA data
What
at
you're
saka yung importation. You should review that every year. It's so high. Even rice, nakakapagtakaway, ang laki-laki.
It's our choice. I mean,
I think we
Mr.
all know
Chair,
why we're importing a lot, Sec RC. No? I think we all know why, di ba?
Well,
I mean, I don't want to say it outright. I don't want to accuse anyone of, illegal acts. But I think we all know why, di ba?
Well,
Yeah.
maybe I'll say it
We all know
a
why,
bit.
Sec. Yeah.
What we all know.
Alam naman natin yan.
We say
Hindi,
it more
hindi
out
sikreto
aloud.
yan, di ba?
Opo, at yung susi, yung salita din ni Sec RC, choice. Isang synonym niyan, political will. If the governments of other countries were able to exercise their political will na ibigay talaga yung suporta sa mga domestic producers nila. It was an explanation for a time, but it didn't remain an excuse forever. What's preventing us from doing the same? Para nga, talagang magkakatotoo yung sinasabi nyo na liliit over time ang share ng importation and we will be able to feed, clothe, house, etc. ourselves.
Yeah. And if again, learning from our lessons and lessons of many countries around us, closing the border to prevent importation will not
Again, Sec
bring us
RC,
anywhere.
gaya ng sinabi ni Chair kanita, we're not talking po about protectionist measures, even an extreme measure like closing our borders. It's just pagbigay ng tamang prioridad, suporta, empowerment, sabi ni Sen Nancy kanina, sa ating domestic producers para ma-supply nila yung karamihan ng ating kailangan para pangdagdag lang, pampuno ng mas pakonte ng pakonte over the years ang importasyon.
I agree with that, Your Honor. Empowerment, the power to choose, and the choice of policy is so important. If we use trade policy restricting trade by say not allowing, and we have done that. We have deployed that many times by not allowing imports when we need them most at that particular time. That's when things get crazy. But when we use other measures and build us up over time, like investing in logistics, why can't we get our logistics invest in? Of course, the farm to market roads that are often mentioned, but my constant plea, Your Honor, is if I look at this technological supports of our farmers, do they have the appropriate planting materials?
Then let's give them to them, Sec RC. Yun naman po yung sinasabi namin. At hindi rin po namin ipinagkakait sa gobyerno to use importation, as you said, at certain points in time kapag kinakailangan. Pero ano na lang siya, pampuno, diba? Pantawid lang. But we have to really see the strategic and long-term policies and programs. Handa kaming ibigay iyon. Chair's even talking about industrial policy para ma-implementan nyo. And we just have to do it and take out the other blocks and exacerbating factors along the way, including smuggling and whatnot, no? Na pati yung smuggling, nagagamit pang excuse yung underproduction daw natin. Kung palakasin nga po natin yung productive capacity ng mga domestic producers, together with the law enforcement, we will undercut the smuggling, di po ba?
Okay, let me supplement the statement of my colleague. Well, rather than picture the Philippines as if it's in a crisis, I don't think the Philippine economy is in a crisis. All right, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank admires the way we handle the Philippine economy. The rating agencies, despite the massive downgrades of economies all over the world, has maintained their rating of the Philippine economy. In fact, recently we have an upgrade in the rating. Inflation expectations. Governor Eli Remolona explained that the inflation expectation is well anchored in 2024 and 2025. So we don't have to do anything more, but continue with we have an interagency committee on inflation that will continue. We have divided the work between food inflation and non-food inflation. The activity of that committee will continue. And on the debt service, I mentioned this yesterday, I'll mention it again. Our debt service, our debt is manageable. The right metric is not the absolute level of debt. It's debt as a percentage of the gross domestic product or the size of the economy. And our debt to GDP ratio is in the neighborhood of around 60%. That's manageable. Okay? Other countries would have 200, 100, and higher debt to GDP ratio. And the structure of our debt is, as explained by the treasurer, is also manageable. Okay? So that's why at the very beginning we already devised what is called the medium-term fiscal framework. This is not an annual framework, not a 3-year framework, but a 6-year framework that will get us back to where we were before the pandemic. And as you know, the pandemic affected all countries in the world. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yes,
Sec.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Sec. Na-appreciate ko naman, kaya ako nag-i-insist mula po kahapon na may crisis situation pa rin, and not just for the Philippines but for other countries. Pero syempre ang pinaka-care natin sa Pilipinas dahil okay, sineselebrate ko naman kapag tinataas yung rating natin ng mga rating agencies. Maintindihan ko yung debt to GDP ratio. Pero the people na kung kanino tayo pinaka nagbubuo ng budget ay yung karamihan ng mga tao who are in crisis. Sila mismo nagsa-self-rate na mahirap. Sila mismo nagsa-self-rate na gutom. It will take time because of the structure of our economy para literally mag-trickle down sa kanila yung ganito mga epekto na average naman yung debt to GDP ratio natin or mataas yung rating natin sa mga international rating agencies. So, gusto ko lang panatilihin sa perspective natin that there is a crisis. Sheltered ang mga tulad namin na middle class, mas sheltered yung mga mayayaman, pero yung karamihan na mahihirap. Kaya ko rin tinatanong yung mga non-monetary measures. Kaya ko itatanong pa yung mga safety nets. No? Iba yung crisis perception ng mga pinaka-vulnerable sa krisis kumpara sa atin na mas protektado laban sa krisis. So, yun po, Mr. Chair. I wonder if Sina Sec RC and Sec Mina would like to add about the non-monetary measures, kung reflected ba sa revenue program at sa budget, or kung hindi, magtatanong na ako ng safety nets.
Yes, non-monetary, still some non-monetary measures, Mr. Chair. Our approach is in response to the inflation is targeted intervention using targeted measures like targeting our ayuda to those who are most vulnerable. And so we are facilitating the completion of our PhilSys ID project, so that everyone will now have ID, so that ayuda will be given directly to the concerned individuals. So wala nang middleman, whether that's a agency or another party. And that way we can reduce substantially the budget for social protection, even as we cover more beneficiaries. Because as of now, with the current system, napakataas yung leakage sa mga ayuda natin dahil very imperfect yung delivery system. But Sec Gatchalian is working very hard to get that system enhanced. So
Pero sorry, Sec RC, sabi niyo po ba marireduce substantially ang budget para sa social
Well,
protection?
let me put this, may increase yung ano.
Increase.
Increase. But what I meant is that the administrative costs as well as the leakage. So in other words, even if we keep the current amount, we'll be able to reach more of those potential those beneficiaries, because there will be less leakage, and we know who exactly those poor are. They are connected directly to our system.
Salamat, Sec RC, for mentioning.
And with
yes,
maybe less
Chair.
duplication also in the receiving on the receiving end.
Salamat, Chair. And salamat, Sec RC, for mentioning the targeted measures, social protection na may not decreased budget, but kahit same level, pero balak nyo po by making it more efficient yung administration na to benefit more. Mabuti naman po kasi kung hindi maraming non-monetary measures, yun na nga, yung safety nets nga po yung susunod na itatanong ko. Kino-contemplate, kasi nga po may balita nung isang araw na parang kung kailan pa sumasama yung panahon at ekonomiya ay kontratiempong, nabalitaan ko po, sinabi ng Finance Secretary na nakaplanong i-wind down ang suporta sa mga mahihirap. So I was going to ask about that, and follow-up question, may scale up po ba halimbawa sa food stamps program ng gobyerno na binanggit din ni Sec Mina kahapon na sa ngayon ay para lamang sa 50,000 na pamilya, o i-adjust na ba ang allowance ng 4Ps? Binanggit din po ni Sec Mina kahapon. Itataas na ba ang sweldo ng mga manggagawa? So tinalakay ni SP kanina. O aayusin na bang palawakin yung crop insurance system ng bansa? Binanggit din ni Sec Mina kahapon para yung mga nasalanta ng hangin, ng baha, ay mas madaling makabangon. O i-adjust na po ba ng LTFRB yung kita ng mga drivers?
Before the answer,
Chair.
I'd just like to acknowledge the presence of one of our committee vice chairs, the chair of the Senate Committee on Public Services, Senator Grace Poe. Good afternoon, ma'am. Go ahead. Anyone can answer the many questions actually raised.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, naipon
Baka sa
lang.
dami, hindi makasabay sa'yo, Sen. Riza. Ang mga...
Yung hindi ko po matapos, Mr. Chair, isasabit
they're
ko in
debating
writing.
which one of your questions they will answer.
Apo.
Sec. Mina, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, as mentioned po dun sa presentation, we will continue po yung mga major social programs that we have po from previous years, and siguro po yung sinabi rin din po ni Secretary R.C. Balisacan at saka ni Secretary Jokno po, moving forward po, baka po, yun nga po, no, para yung maging mas focus po, better administration and implementation po dun sa pagbibigay ng mga ayuda, because we know that there's a lot of leakage po in terms of yung distribution ng ating mga ayuda at saka mga cash grants sa ating mga beneficiaries po. And siguro po, while we are we exited the pandemic, some sort of nag-exit na po tayo, maybe in our future budget, also it's reflected quite here na rin po, mas dadamihan po natin yung parang mga livelihood opportunities and programs na binibigay po natin sa ating mga kababayan. In fact, when we presented the budget to the President, he noticed po that yung mga livelihood projects natin, it's across all government departments and agencies po. Kaya po sa 2025, binigyan po kami ng direktiba po ng ating presidente to increase yung, kung pwede po pa, yung budget for livelihood para po makapagbigay ng mas maraming trabaho sa ating mga kababayan. And baka po pwedeng essentialize lang po sa isang agency, because we know that meron po ang DOST, meron ang DTI, meron po ang dami pong ahensya na nagpro-provide ng livelihood. So, baka mas maganda po na tama po, i-rationalize, i-streamline, ilagay lang po sa isang ahensya para po mas madali din po yung pagbibigay ng ating mga benefits sa mga beneficiaries. Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
Pero Sec Mina, i-maintain ba o even dadagdagan or babawasan yung budget para sa 4Ps sa 2024?
Dito po ngayon, tumaas, no?
Kasi kung tama yung naalala ko, yun yung subject nung sinabi ni Sec Jokno sa isang balita.
Nag-increase po siya. In fact, nag-increase po
Let me clear my statement na hindi po yun immediate, no? Ang assumption po ng sabi ko na in the future baka pwede nating bawasan if we make the system more efficient. For example, pag nabawasan po natin yung leakage, no? Then only those who are deserving should get it. And meron na po tayong mga bagong proseso ho ngayon. No? For example, if we limit it to those who have the national ID, kasi yun talagang identified kayo, national ID. And i-match po natin, tinatawag po natin basic deposit account. Pwede po magbukas sa land bank ng basic deposit account for everybody. No? Ayun, ililink po natin doon. Ngayon po kasi, ngayon parang cash card Anybody can get it, cash card. Hindi, may duplication po, marami pong leakages. And sa pang-assumption nun, yun sinasabi po ni Secretary Mina na ang dami-dami hong mga nagkalat yung mga ayuda. Sabi ni Presidente, why don't you consolidate it? Meron ka sa DSWD, meron ka sa DA, meron ka sa DOLE, meron ka sa DTR. Madami, meron DOST. Why not consolidate it? Ganun. Yun po ang ibig sabihin na in the future, baka pwede nating mabawasan yan. Lalo na pagka gumana po yung employment, pag marami na pong may trabaho, mas hindi mo na natin kailangan ng ganun kalaking.
At yung in the future po na yon, Sec, given greater efficiency sa ayuda programs, given generation ng more quality jobs and employment, ano po yung time frame nung in the future na yon na babawasan yung sa 4Ps?
Hindi po yung 4Ps po, hindi po yun, more or less constant po yun. That's about 4 million. No?
4.4 million po. Pero yung 4Ps po kasi di po ba may conditionalities yun. So,
What
as
you're
we
saying
move
is
forward po,
pag nag-graduate na, pasok na ng bago.
opo, nasa iba
Yun ang
naman
sinasabi
po
niya.
siya. And then, sana po eventually, mabawasan yung denominator natin para makita po natin yung impact nung binibigay po natin na grants sa mga kababayan po natin.
And in fact, over the years at every budget debates na babanggit din natin na effective yung 4Ps. Nag-graduate talaga yung mga pamilya, pati yung mga anak nila nag-graduate sa mga high school at marami as valedictorian, salutatorian at marami sa kanila enrolled ngayon sa mga
Even college, I believe,
SUCs.
meron ng cases na college graduate.
Great to hear. Oo, Mr. Chair. Follow-up question lamang dito. Sinabi ng SWS nung June 2023 na dumami ang gutom, so lalakihan po ba natin ang pondo para sa pagtugon sa gutom?
Yung sa food stamp po ba ito ng DSWD?
Pwede po. Opo,
Yes, ma'am.
Sec.
Yung kasi po, as of now, they're undergoing pilot project po in a couple of different areas po. And then ADB is helping the SWD po to come up with yung regulations natin once we implement it sa 2024. So as of now po, nakapeg po muna siya sa 50,000 households. But I know po sa budget natin, meron po tayong budget sa may naka-standby. May naka-standby ka, di ba? In case dumami. May naka-standby fund po tayo. In case po, after the study of the SWD and ADB, dumami po yung beneficiaries po for the Walang Gutom program.
Good to hear.
So, one of your slides showed bigger budget for school feeding or one of the feeding programs. One of your slides showed the bigger budget.
Yes
for that.
po. A major part din po kasi nung increase nung budget doon is medyo tumaas po yung price nung milk and ano po. Kaya po
You're not really
tumaas
feeding
din
more,
po siya.
you're just,
Meron din po,
the
pero
numbers
may
are up.
portion
Thank
po
you.
talaga na
Thank you,
tumaas yung presyo.
Salamat, Chair, at salamat, Sec. Well, it's good to hear kahit papano itong mixed responses dun sa first couple of questions ko. Maybe I would have wished for more on the non-monetary measures, pero there's some reassurance regarding yung mga safety nets. Kasi otherwise, kung hindi pa rin gagawin itong adjustments na ito, sa kita at wala ring public subsidies galing sa budgets, baka tanungin tayo anong sinasabi natin sa mga Pilipino, no, na bahala na lang kayo sa buhay nyo. Sige po, so to my second question po, so, follow up ko yung ilang points na ni-raise ni Sen. Loren kahapon sa right-of-way acquisition funds. So a few days ago, DPWH Sec. Bonoan told the Committee on Public Works that for 3 consecutive years, Congress has been given very little in the way of right-of-way and resettlement budgets. As of last week daw po ito, na 1.7 billion pesos lamang daw ng kanilang 37 billion pesos right-of-way and resettlement funds ay na-release. Tama po ba itong claim ni Sec. Bonoan?
Just to share while they're retrieving the
Yes, Chair.
answers, Henry. Sometimes the right of way, kasi it's a lump sum eh. If we knew that what the specific project it would be, so we give them the money, but in the past, hindi nila nagagastos. So yun ang problema. So it's kind of a chicken and egg, di ba? If they could give us the specific anong paggagastosan ng right of way, then we can allot it. Pero when we see, all of us here in this room know it, if your utilization is low, then you will lose that money. Ganun lang yun eh.
Salamat, Chair. And in fact, that guides me in wrapping up because I'm advised na overtime na ako. Actually, swak dun sa last request ko this noon, Mr. Chair, if the DBCC could provide the Finance Committee a report of the right-of-way acquisition and resettlement funds na nasa kasalukuyang na nasa 2023 NEP. And over the years, ito po ba ay na-reduce sa NEP? Tapos in the
Well, I can answer that already,
Okay,
Senrisa.
thank you, Chair.
We really reduce it because we look at the utilization for previous years eh. Pag hindi nga nagagastos, just like DOTR, DPWH, pag mababang utilization, then we will use it where the funds can be used more efficiently, Madam Senator.
I agree, Mr. Chair. So, but would the DBCC report to our committee still be
But
useful
nonetheless, could you
request?
comply with the request of Vice Chair
Yes.
Ontiveros, as well as
po.
earlier may request din yata si Senator Loren and si Senator Aimee for information. Just to remind.
If
We,
Yes, Sec.
we will submit po. And then siguro po, just to follow po yung sinabi po na ating chair. Kasi nga po, for example po, although we try to provide a bigger budget like is in 2023 po na nabawasan po siya sa GAA. But it's still substantial. It's 1.6 billion. Pero to date po, parang hindi pa po nagagastos much of the amount. Zero obligation pa po siya as of now. Siguro, kasi po pag right of way, kailangan merong perfected contract, nakausap
Kaya nga,
na po
bakit
lahat ng
maybe we haven't really
Kaya nga
sorted
po.
out. Di ba may batas na yan sa
Yes
right of
po.
way law that there are certain preconditions before you can allot funds. And Senator Ping, I remember, would stand up, Senator Risa, do you remember? He would stand up and remind DPWH, pagka hihingi kayo ng pondo sa amin, dapat alam namin saan pupunta yung pondo, di ba? I think he stood up on at least 3 consecutive budgets, if I remember right.
And if I
Yes, I
remember
share the chair's
din po,
recollection.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair, parang ngayon lang po kami rin naglalabas ng mga action documents dun sa mga right-of-way. So, middle of the year na usually. Halos ngayon lang po naglalabas ng mga action documents, SARO, para sa right-of-way.
Thank you for that.
Salamat, Chair, and salamat, Sec. So yun po, if the DBCC could please provide that to the committee na reduce ba sa NEP, sa course ng GAA approval, o hindi lang ba nare-release ng DBM yung nasa budget na. I'll just submit through the Chair in writing yung iba ko mga tanong na, halimbawa, sa DOTR din po ba ay medyo ganito ang nangyayari? Paano po natin maasahan ng DPWH na gamitin ang infrastructure budgets niya, pati na ang budgets niya para mabawasan ang baha? Majo and other colleagues have been asking about this since yesterday. Mabawasan ang baha sa Pampanga, sa Bulacan, concern din ng Bataan, kung wala tayong pambayad pala sa right-of-way at kung wala din tayong pondo para sa pabahay ng mga apektadong pamilya. And lastly, isasubmit ko rin in writing through the chair yung mga huling tanong ko sana dun sa, tinanong din ni Sen. Loren kahapon, yung declining government spending dun sa PSA DDP reports. Okay. So maraming salamat, Mr. Chair, at sa mga secretaries.
Thank you very much for the very good questions, Sen. Risa. And yung mga hindi mo natanong, we'll try to get the side in writing. Thank you very much. Just an administrative, when we return, let's allow our secretaries and their staffs to have lunch. And just the order is... ito first round pa lang to ng questioning sa kanila. So that's why I've tried to be liberal in the time because we want them to exhaust their questions. So hindi na wala nang balik po. Vice Chair Senator J.V. Hersto, Senators Gatchalian, Jinggoy, Sen. Tulfo, Sen. Grace Poe, Sen. Tolentino. That's the order when we return. And thank you. We'll suspend the hearing to allow our secretaries to have lunch. Thank you very much to our colleagues and secretaries and their staff. We'll come back at 1:10 p.m. Thank you.